Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku needed urgent help at Kirishima's place? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. It was either really early or really late. Around 1 in the morning, Ijiro Kirishima paused his video game to grab a snack when his phone rang. He was awful at replying to texts, but he never missed a phone call. Leaving his food on the counter, he went back to the living room to grab his phone. "Talk to me," he said cheerily without even bothering to look who it was. "Kei Kirishima?" Between the panting and crying, the mentioned couldn't figure out who it was. He glanced at his phone display. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya was in his liberal arts program. They had been in group assignments a lot together, but outside of that they didn't really hang out. Midoriya? What's going on? What's wrong? He stood still in the center of the room, ready to react however needed. "He's gonna kill me if he finds me. Help me please." Izuku sobbed into the phone while trying to keep his voice as quiet as possible. Kirishima has his keys in his hand and his shoes on his feet in an instant. "Tell me where you are." Izuku did as he was told and Kirishima was on his way. He kept talking to the distraught man, not letting the call drop as he ran towards a plaza Izuku said he was hiding behind. Kirishima didn't know Izuku that well, but working together as often as they did for school, they learned a little about each other. Izuku had left everything behind to go to school here, which seemed odd given that it was just a liberal arts program. The kid didn't know anyone in the area, other than the boyfriend he had moved here with. Being the kind of guy he was, Kirishima told him to call him anytime he needed anything. When he had said that, he meant the usual new-to-town things, going to an event in the city together, or study partner, or as a source of directions if Izuku got lost. Or even which places had the best takeout. He hadn't meant a call at 1 a.m. that would lead to him running down the street in PJ pants and a t-shirt in the rain, but he couldn't turn away anyone that needed help. Finding the plaza, he ducked around back. "I'm here," he said into the phone. "Where are you?" A thin figure stepped out from between the garbage dumpsters and the building wall. He constantly looked around, as if waiting for an axe-wielding murderer to jump out. As Izuku neared, Kirishima saw it was for good reason. Izuku's wild green hair was soaked, one eye was swollen and it hadn't fully finished bruising. His lip was split and there was a bruise forming on his cheek. Fresh fingerprints bruised his neck. Kirishima had noticed faint ones on him before but just thought he was into Kawaii stuff. As he took in Izuku's pitiful state, complete with soaking wet clothes and sock-covered feet, he realized just how wrong he had been. "Let's go back to my place," Kirishima told him as he took charge of the situation. "Then you're going to explain everything." Once Izuku nodded, Kirishima headed back to his apartment. They took routes that would keep them away from the main roads in case Izuku was still being hunted. It took longer to get there, but eventually they made it. A motorcycle helmet on the table and his food missing from the counter told Kirishima his roommate had gotten home, so he ushered Izuku into his bedroom and got them both a dry change of clothes. After they were dry and Kirishima made some tea, they hung out in his bedroom. "So what happened?" Kirishima asked as he ran a hand through his damp red hair, making it stand up on ends. "My boyfriend isn't always the nicest guy," Izuku admitted. Kirishima couldn't hide the scoff. It seemed like a bit of an understatement. Izuku gave him a sad smile before continuing. "If things aren't how he wants, he gets like this." "What did you do?" Kirishima asked. "Or didn't do, I guess." Izuku shrugged. "I didn't wash the shirt he was going to wear tomorrow." "That led to all this?" The redhead motioned to his friend's face. "It wasn't that bad this time." His voice had been even but it began trembling. "I don't know what I was thinking. When he started hitting me, I hit him back this time." "Good." Kirishima grinned, pointy teeth gleaming. "Not if I wanted to live." Before he could react, I ran. I didn't even stop for my shoes. I made him so angry. First with the hitting, then the running. If I ever go back there, he will kill me. I'm afraid he will if he even just finds me on the street. Then obviously you're gonna stay here. We can get Bakugo's face on a shirt and have it say, "I know this guy," for you to wear so no one bugs you. That's step number 1. Then we'll see about getting you back on your feet. Who is Bakugo? Izuku asked. My roommate. You'll understand when you meet him. They spent the next short while talking about more light-hearted things so Izuku would feel safe enough to get some sleep before Katsuki Bakugo would wake them up only a couple hours later. Hey, assface. Wake the F up you be. Shouting accompanied the sound of a fist banging on the door. Kirishima groaned and rolled over, entire body stiff. He didn't bother to answer the rage monster outside of his room because he knew his roommate had already wandered off. Which was good because he needed a minute to figure out why he was on the floor. He glanced up at his bed and everything clicked into place. Izuku Midoriya was in his bed, awake and pressed as close to the wall as he could. Blankets were drawn up to his chin as he trembled, clearly hoping and praying that the childlike notion that monsters couldn't get you if you were in bed applied. Don't worry, man, Kirishima yawned. It's just my roommate. Been best friends with him since we were kids. Don't let first impressions fool you. He's good people. He doesn't sound like good people. Izuku's eyes never left the door as he waited for the angry one to return. Kirishima watched Izuku watch the door with green eyes wide and afraid. Well, one eye was wide. The other was half closed from swelling. He wished he could say Izuku was looking better, but if anything, he looked worse now that the swelling was in full swing and the bruises on his face had settled to dark purples and black. I'm telling you, Kirishima stretched and yawned, it's just Bakugo. His bark is worse than his bite. Come on. He stood at his door and looked back at Izuku, who was still huddled on the bed. Look, you can stay here if you want. I won't drag you out. But I'm not the kind of guy that's going to save your butt in the middle of the night only to feed you to wolves in the morning. Izuku gave a small, trusting smile before climbing off the bed and following his friend. After all, there was a reason Kirishima was the one he had turned to in his time of need. Hey numbnuts, how much French toast do you want? Good morning to you too, Kirishima said before asking for 4. How many do you want? He asked Izuku. Before he could answer, Bakugo made a very eloquent noise from the kitchen. I'm cooking, dumbass. I make however many I want. I wasn't talking to you. Wild blonde hair popped around the dividing wall. You mean someone actually wanted to F you? That's shocking. He eyed Izuku up and down. Didn't think you were into D-. The hell'd you do to him? I had nothing to do with that. Bakugo, this is Izuku Midoriya. He's in my program. Izuku, this is my best friend and roommate Katsuki Bakugo. I'm sorry for being an inconvenience. Ikuzu played with the string on the slightly too big PJ pants Kirishima lent him. The redhead plopped himself on his chair as Bakugo went back into the kitchen. He's gonna stay with us for a while. Ha! There was that eloquent noise again. For how long? As long as it takes him to get on his feet and not have a psycho boyfriend trying to kill him. Kirishima grinned at Izuku, trying to keep the other man at ease as Bakugo stomped around the kitchen. FS sake. Bakugo slammed a couple plates down, each noise making Izuku flinch. It got worse when Bakugo came into the dining area, because it meant the clattering of the plates was right next to him. His scarred hands came up to shield his face as Bakugo dropped a plate onto the table in front of him before doing the same to Kirishima. He set his own plate down a little softer and drowned his French toast in syrup before stabbing it and taking a bite. I ain't gonna deck you, so you can knock off the cowering with me. Izuku opened his mouth to apologize, but Kirishima cut him off. Yeah, because he knows you nearly breaking plates and swearing is you just being your charming self, came the dry reply. See Baku, this is why you can't get a date. You're attractive but you have the personality of a dumpster. Yeah, well, you can't keep a girlfriend because you're stupid and you have lame-ass hedgehog hair. Despite himself, Izuku couldn't help the smile that came from the two friends bickering and slinging insults back and forth. As angry as this Bakugo seemed to be constantly, Izuku felt like he had made the right choice in going to Kirishima for help. Sheet. For the first time since meeting Izuku at the start of the school year, Kirishima finally heard the smaller man swear. What's wrong? The redhead asked as he came out of his room, dressed and surprisingly ready for class. I don't have any of my books. Kirishima and Bakugo had loaned Izuku as much as they could. His form was too slight for their clothes, but he wore them anyway and he smelled like gunmetal explosion body wash. It would make sense he had no notes or textbooks if he didn't even have shoes, but it had been so far from the front of his mind that he didn't realize until now. You can use mine. And I'm sure someone will lend you their notes. Except that I'm a group project leader in 2 of our classes and my gen ed. Everything's on my laptop. Izuku rubbed his hands over his face as he went over his options, all the while muttering out loud, "Today we have class from 11 to 1, then 2 until 5. His lunch is 12 to 12:30 unless something comes up and he has to take it later. I have an hour window where I can sneak in and grab my stuff. If he takes a late lunch, I would still dash." "Hey nerd, you talk too much." Bakugo's voice shook him from his thoughts. "I'm sorry," Izuku hung his head. "I work things out loud. I know, it drives people crazy. I've been working on cutting it back." "You're going to go back in there?" Kirishima's face was etched in concern. Izuku shrugged. "My classmates are counting on me." "Man, look at your face. You can't go back. Alone." "I'm not staying." Izuku and Bakugo spoke at the same time. Izuku looked over at the blonde who was leaning over the table with a devious, almost diabolical grin on his face. "Baku!" Kirishima wasn't sure he heard correctly any more than Izuku did. Rather, he was sure he did but was hoping he didn't. "He can't go back and get his sheet alone," Bakugo repeated. "That's why we're going with him." "That's breaking and entering," the redhead pointed out. "Not really if he lives there. And it wouldn't be our first time anyway." Izuku's eyes widened. What kind of people did he fall into cahoots with? "We all go. Nerd gets his nerdy things, you keep a lookout and I'm the muscle if needed." The best kind of people, Izuku decided. People that would help out someone in need, regardless of legality. "Nerd, you got keys?" Izuku felt his pockets even though he knew the answer. "No. That settles it." Bakugo grinned wider at Kirishima. "I'll blow the door off the place. If you want to be subtle so this fucker doesn't know the nerd came back around, we're going to need you." At Izuku's confused expression, Kirishima explained. "See, back in high school we decided one of us needed to learn to pick locks. Baku is good for kicking down doors and smashing windows but has a hard time with the subtle arts. I'm a natural at it. Combination locks, door locks, hotel door locks, you name it. But not deadbolts. I haven't figured those out and I haven't tried even an easy lock in like 3 years." "Why would you do this?" Izuku asked them quietly, his eyes filled with tears because even though they were talking about committing a felony, they were doing it for him. Their willingness to help was so selfless. "Because Baku is a bad seed. Trouble is his middle name. We nearly got busted last time. You're enabling him, Midoriya." The chuckle from Kirishima told him he wasn't as upset about it as he pretended. "I guess it's settled. I'll pick you up at what? 1. Izuku nodded and opened his mouth to thank the new sort of friend he was glad he made. But there was a flaw in the plan, which Kirishima pointed out. "Pick us up? On your bike?" Bakugo shrugged. "Yeah. King Explosion Murder is the only thing I'll ride into battle." King Explosion Murder? Hearing bike initially had Izuku thinking of a bicycle. My Fat Boy Low. Complete with Screaming Eagle. What? Were those words Izuku was supposed to understand? Kirishima shook his head. "It's his motorcycle, which we all can't fit on. I don't even think there's a beach seat. When has something like that ever stopped us?" Bakugo's voice was getting louder, his eyebrows more furrowed. Izuku flinched automatically and Kirishima saw it out of the corner of his eye. "I know you're excited but calm down." "You're too," Kirishima flailed a little as he searched for the word. "Big. You take getting used to. You're scaring him." Bakugo looked over at Izuku before letting out a teasy noise. But Izuku did notice that he stopped yelling. "Fine. Whatever. You and Kiri take the bus and I'll meet you there. We raid the nerd pad. Then the nerd can ride beach in case Doucheface is around." "What about me?" Kirishima wasn't liking where he was going with this. "You take half the loot and bus it." Knowing there was no other way to convince Bakugo of anything else, Kirishima agreed. Izuku gave the blonde the address before heading to the door after the redhead so they could make it to class. Kirishima? I don't have shoes. His voice was small and apologetic. I got this. Rummaging through the closet, Kirishima pulled out a pair of red Crocs. That sheet, Bakugo spat. I thought he was your friend, fucknut. They're good shoes, came the immediate defense. They're comfy. You're an embarrassment. Bakugo was growly as he shoved his best friend aside and pulled out a pair of skate shoes. He tossed them at Izuku, who immediately put them on before Kirishima could take them away and make him wear the Crocs. Your feet are so big. Izuku marveled, not thinking about what other body part foot size could be compared to. Bakugo just had a smirk of smug pride. I know. Izuku didn't respond or make eye contact, not wanting Bakugo to think he was flirting. He crouched down and tightened the laces before straightening to head to class. He followed Kirishima out of the door, pausing to look back at Bakugo. Thank you. For everything. Get the fault, Bakugo? Replied without any real bite. Izuku gave him a tentative smile before closing the apartment door. Class went as expected, with classmates milling around Izuku, asking if he was alright and how he got so beat up. Kirishima spun a smooth story about how they had gone out clubbing the night before and he had hooked up with the bouncer's girl and Izuku had stepped in to buy him time to zip up but got the snot beat out of him. Given that it was within the realm of possibilities for Kirishima, most of the class bought it. The pair shared a textbook and supplies, which Kirishima left in the room to collect later so it wasn't a burden during Operation Quirkless, a name coined by One-Eye Jiro Kirishima. As they left the class together, Izuku started getting chatty, his pitch rising with nerves. He got on his usual bus and sat in a window seat. Kirishima sat beside him and ended up putting a hand on Izuku's knee to stop the bouncing. It'll be easy, he assured his friend. Bakugo will be there. You really trust him, don't you? Izuku asked. With my life. There was zero hesitation. This won't go wrong. And if it does, you'll get away. Baku will make sure of it. He's rude, abrasive and acts like a total but he's a loyal son of a beach. There was so much affection in Kirishima's voice as he spoke. He's like a burnt marshmallow. He's charred and is so unappealing you won't want to be near him, but inside he's sweet and gooey. And like molten lava that makes you wish for the sweet release of death? Izuku chimed in with and Kirishima laughed heartily. You'll get along with him just fine, the sharp-toothed boy assured him. Sooner than Izuku would have liked, they were standing on the sidewalk looking up at the classy apartment building. It seemed more imposing now than it would have any other time. Took you long enough. Both Izuku and Kirishima jumped as Bakugo approached from behind. Scared much? Kirishima shoved him lightly in the shoulder before they all set their game faces. Bakugo cracked his knuckles, still wearing his leather gloves. Izuku tried not to look over his shoulder every other step. The building had 2 doors. Anyone could enter the first, but the second could only be accessed by tenants using either a key fob or a passcode. The door unlocked and opened without a hitch, despite his hands trembling. Izuku gave them a weak smile and led them to the elevator. After hitting the up button, he wiped his clammy hands on his pants. His nervousness was no longer manifesting as higher-pitched talking. Now he was just quiet as he tried to keep his stomach settled. As they rode the elevator, Izuku got paler and paler with each floor. Too soon, yet not soon enough, they reached the 11th floor, passing doors until they reached "This is it." Izuku's voice had gotten rough and trembled as the fear began rising. Kirishima sunk to his knees and got to work on the lock. It took him longer than it would have a couple of years ago, but he still got it. The trio stepped into the apartment and looked around, not only for the boyfriend, but also to take in the view. It was immaculate. Every single item was in its place and there wasn't a trace of dust to be found. It was surprisingly bright and airy. Potted plants were soaking up sun near the balcony door. Framed pictures of the couple decorated the wall the television was against, and a painting hanging on the opposite wall above the couch. It looked like a normal apartment, a normal home. The bruises on Izuku's face told a different story. Kirishima placed his hands on Izuku's shoulders. We need to get bags packed. Do you have a backpack? The words seemed to wake Izuku from his stupor. He set his jaw with a nod and went to the bedroom. He took his backpack from the closet where it was already packed with his school supplies. He hurriedly opened dresser drawers, adding socks and underwear to the bag. He fluttered around the room, adding shirts, pants and sweaters. 10 minutes and counting, Bakugo said from the front door where he was standing guard. After all, they needed time to drop their things off and get to class. Izuku hauled the backpack to the front door. He hurried to the kitchen to grab a reusable bag before running to the bathroom where he threw all his toiletries into the bag. He tried to keep everything left behind in place as much as he could. Even though this chapter in his life was over, it would take him a long time to get over the fear of leaving things where they fell. He brought his second bag to the door. "I'm ready." "Shoes." Izuku nodded at Bakugo's suggestion. He opened the closet and took 2 pairs of shoes out and took 3 coats off of the hangers. He stuffed what he could in with the toiletries, but there was a winter coat that wouldn't go in. "You take the backpack and I'll take the rest," Kirishima offered and grabbed the reusable bag, draping the coat over his arm while Izuku strapped on the backpack. With set determination, he led the other 2 back to the elevator. They made it to the ground floor and back to the street. The operation had gone off without a hitch. "Sheet. There's the bus. I'll meet you back home." Kirishima ran across the street, which only warranted 1 honk from a car. He caught the bus successfully and waved bye to his group. At the same moment, Izuku and Bakugo realized they hadn't really been alone together and it was awkward. They were strangers after all. Izuku opened his mouth to break the silence, but before he could, Bakugo moved a slick black helmet at him and mounted the chrome-detailed Harley. "Put this on and hold on tight." He immediately put it on and looked around, getting used to the field of vision as it covered his head and face completely. In addition, the visor was tinted. He felt hidden from the world. Climbing onto the seat behind Bakugo, he wrapped his arms around the trim waist. Izuku was so close it was almost intimate. There wasn't enough room to sit any other way though. Not to mention he was a little scared, having never been on a bike before. The blonde started up the bike and Izuku jerked a little, not having expected to feel the rumble through his whole body. He peered around blonde hair. "Bakugo!" The mentioned tensed at Izuku's voice so close to his ear even though it was muffled. "Where's your helmet?" "I only have one." Before Izuku could protest about safety, the bike began moving forward. The smaller man's arms tightened more and once he was sure he was secure, Bakugo drove his bike out of the parking lot. He stuck to side streets when he could so as to avoid getting pulled over for lack of a helmet. He wasn't used to riding with someone and it was making him tense. He held his passenger's life in his hands and it was something he had never considered in the past. Kirishima had been his best friend since they were 8 and even he had only been on the king a handful of times. They did stunts down residential streets years ago when Bakugo first got it, back when they were even more young and stupid. Kiri hadn't clung to Bakugo nearly this much. Initially, Izuku was afraid to even move his head to look around in case it shifted Bakugo's balance. Though the more they traveled, the more comfortable he felt. It was a strange sensation for him, trusting someone like this. Trust was a strong word and maybe that wasn't the right one. All Izuku knew was that he was free from his boyfriend. He supposed X was the more appropriate term now, and if he died on the way, it was because of a decision he had made for himself. It wouldn't be at the hands of someone else. Izuku had been wanting to leave Chisaki for months, but aside from thinking he had nowhere to go, the prospect of being alone out in the city and failing to survive overrode the bruises and broken bones. He had been threatened with death before, but those were just words. They were nothing compared to what silently crackled in the air the night before when Izuku had hit him back. He had known he wasn't going to survive the night. But he ran and in doing so, he survived. Driving away from the apartment gave Izuku a new breath of life. He loosened his grip on Bakugo's body from death grip to normal and leaned his face against the leather-clad back in front of him. Bakugo had an easy confidence to him as he drove. He was in complete control of the 700-pound machine beneath him. As they slowed to a stop at a set of lights on a busier street they needed to cross, Izuku lifted his face off of Bakugo's back to look to his other side. Which was when he saw it. He clenched at Bakugo's jacket and took deep breaths. In the car next to the bike was the man he was running from. Chisaki's features were tense. His jaw was clenched and Izuku could see the coldness in his eyes from there. Their eyes met, but Bakugo's helmet obscured his face. Between that and the ill-fitting clothes, there was no way he could be recognized. Izuku tried to turn his head as casually as he could. A fingerless leather glove rested on his forearms, which were against Bakugo's stomach. Of course Bakugo could feel him shaking. He was like a leaf. Bakugo was making sure he was good so he wasn't distracted while driving. Izuku pressed the side of the helmet against Bakugo's back, hoping the other understood his silent way of saying he was fine. He wasn't though. He was suffocating. Izuku couldn't take his eyes off the car, even though Kai was no longer looking at him. He needed the helmet off. But it was the barrier between himself and Kai, the only thing keeping them alive. Because if he knew it was him, Kai would run them off the road. Bakugo had done so much to help a total stranger, as much as he swore and made a stink about it. Izuku couldn't let him die as payment for his kindness. And so Izuku held his breath, willing the terror down, willing his body not to tremble as tears slid down his cheeks. Bakugo didn't know Izuku was crying until they got back to their apartment building. He parked King Explosion Murder and turned the machine off. He couldn't dismount until Izuku let go off him though. It was then he felt the slight shudders and muffled sobs which has been masked by the rumbles of the Harley. Nerd. When Izuku didn't answer, he turned around as best he could despite the death grip around his waist. Yo nerd. Midoriya, right? I got us back in one piece. You good? As soon as he heard those last words, Izuku broke. He let go of Bakugo and clawed at the helmet. He couldn't get it off and it was suffocating. Suddenly he was free of it, barely recognizing that Bakugo had gotten him out. The grimy yellow-tinted lights of the underground parking garage lit up his surroundings. He gulped in air, but it wasn't enough. He couldn't catch his breath and panic clawed at his throat. He gasped repeatedly, trying to get more and more air into his lungs. He cried harder in fear when he just couldn't. Suddenly all he could see was Bakugo. Their foreheads were pressed together as red eyes held his. Breathe. You just gotta breathe. I got you. Look at me and breathe, Midoriya. Bakugo's voice was firm, but gentler than he had heard up to this point. I got you. You're safe. Having Bakugo so close meant he couldn't focus on anything else, and after a few minutes of shuddering breaths, Izuku's panic subsided. You good? When Izuku nodded, Bakugo stepped back and helped the disoriented man off the motorcycle. "V happened out there? I felt you relax. Then you got like this." Not that Bakugo cared, he knew he was a good driver and was ready to fight if Izuku challenged that. Or Kirishima would accuse him of making the nerd cry. Something like that. He was there, Izuku told him after a minute. Who? Kai. He was beside us when we stopped at the lights. Bakugo racked his brain but came up blank. It was just another car to him. That's punchy, right? Izuku nodded and took a deep steadying. He didn't know it was me. But he's so angry. Bakugo took a minute to think about the situation. I don't effing know what to say, man. I didn't see this guy. But he's out to kill you and you still kept yourself together and your weight center while I drove. You did good, you DMN nerd. Helmet under his arm, Bakugo started walking to the elevator. He hated when people were upset. He had no idea how he was supposed to comfort them, especially strangers. The bit he could do was thanks to Kirishima. Bakugo was raised to stuff emotions down and not show any weakness. If anything was eating at him, he waited until he was alone to dwell on it. Kiri accepted that emotions were a part of himself and embraced them. It had definitely been a learning experience for Bakugo. If he was being honest, it still was. Izuku followed him and as they stood next to each other waiting for the elevator, he gave the blonde a watery smile. Thank you, Bakugo. Whatever, the nerd. They had gotten back to the apartment before Kirishima. Unsure of where to put him, Bakugo told him to pile his stuff against the window in the living room. Izuku would have to sleep on the couch, but they lived a couple of floors up, so it was secure. The door to the balcony didn't lock, but Bakugo didn't know of anyone that could scale up the side of the building to get to it. The television backed to the window, which had thick curtains hanging to block light so they weren't blinded if they watched TV during the day. Before Izuku could begin to unpack, Bakugo stalked towards the hallway that led to the bedrooms and bathroom. I'm going to bed, Bakugo announced. Don't be loud. Okay. Good and dash, Izuku paused. Could he say good night if it was almost 2 in the afternoon? He settled on a sleep well, which the blonde responded to with an incoherent grumble. Izuku looked at the clock. 1:53 p.m. He was never going to make it to class. His attendance was impeccable. No matter how bad his body hurt, no matter what Kai had done to him the night before, Izuku showed up to every class with his bright and friendly demeanor in place. He loved going to school. He could be the true version of himself. But today he was exhausted. Physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. Just as he was deciding he would allow himself a day off, Kirishima burst through the door. His face immediately lit up seeing his new roommate. His excitable voice ringing through the apartment. There you are. I'm glad you guys made it back. Shut up, you stupid sack of shit, came the bellow from Bakugo's room. He went to bed, Izuku informed him quietly. Kirishima nodded and lowered his voice accordingly. He does that a lot around this time. Are you coming to class? Shaking his head, Izuku declined. I need to come to terms with the last 24 hours. That's fair, man. A lot has happened. I'm going to class. I can't afford to miss any. You live here now, so help yourself to anything you want. If there's an angry face drawn on any food packages, it's Baku's and I recommend not touching it. For the most part, Bakugo didn't label his food. But after Kirishima ate all but 2 ice cream bars before the angry blonde had even gotten one, it ended with a brawl in the living room that upturned furniture. These days Bakugo put drawings of angry faces on food he didn't want to share. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku smiled. Have fun in class. I'll email the prof that I won't be in. Kirishima left him with a wave as he started his run to the college. True to his word, Izuku pulled out his phone and emailed his professor. When he was finished, he set his phone on the coffee table before turning his attention to the bags Kirishima had left by the door. By the time Kirishima had come home a couple of hours later, Izuku had settled in, everything in its place as best he could, and had even been cleaning. The wafting smell of pizza followed the sound of the door opening. Neither called out a greeting because they didn't want to wake the rage monster. You don't have to do that, you know that, right? Kirishima clarified as Izuku pulled back from where he was half in the oven cleaning. He set the pizza boxes on the counter and grabbed some plates. I know. Cleaning has just become a habit. It helps me think. And plus I don't know how else to thank you guys for all you've done until I get a job and can pitch in with expenses. Dude, Kirishima lifted his hands. You haven't even been here a full day. One step at a time, my man. For now it's pizza time. Grab some slices. By slices, Kirishima had apparently meant half a pie if his plate was anything to go by. Izuku only grabbed 2 before following the redhead to the living room. Do we need to wake Bakugo up? Not if you value your life. Always let him sleep. His sleep schedule is so effed up. If I'm getting takeout, I get enough for him and he can have it when he wakes up. You're a really good friend, Kirishima, Izuku told him, not only from personal experience. It might sound cheesy, but I love Baku more than anything. We're the only family we've got. His mom beat the shit out of him growing up. He ran away and came to live with us. A couple years ago my folks were killed and it's just been us ever since. I'm so sorry to hear that. Even though they were expected words, Izuku meant it. He hadn't spoken to his own mother in far too long. He missed her terribly, but Kai monitored his phone calls so much that the calls got less and less until they just stopped happening. It's all good, man. Our little family has grown now that you're here. We got a new bro. Kirishima beamed at him so brightly that his red eyes had scrunched shut. I'm grateful you helped me out. I didn't know who to go to. You were the closest I had to a friend. I couldn't go to my mom. Kai cut me off from her and she Izuku paused. All that was going through his head was memories of his mom. Times that they would make dinner together throwing the weirdest ingredients together and laughing about it. How she pulled him out of school when his favorite superhero had a movie come out so they could go together. The tears she pretended weren't there when he and Kai were moving hours away from home. He was hit with a huge wave of emotion over how much he missed her. She probably wanted nothing to do with him now that he had gone so long without talking to her. A sudden sob caught in his throat and he couldn't stop the tears that poured out of his eyes. Whoa man, are you okay? Kirishima sat up a little as his attention focused on his friend. He put a hand on the smaller man's shoulder. Sorry, Izuku stammered. I just didn't realize how much I miss her. Is she still around? When Izuku nodded, Kirishima gave him an encouraging smile. Go give her a call. You can use my room if you want privacy. Izuku nodded and grabbed his phone off the coffee table. With a sniffle to try to rein in his emotions, he went into the offered room. He closed the door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed. With a shaking hand pulling up her number, he let it ring. After 3 rings he was about to hang up as anxiety mounted that she wouldn't want to talk to him. Hello. Mom. Izuku. Sweetie, how are you? I've missed you so much. And just like that, Izuku broke into sobs. Inko Midoriya immediately went into comforting mode. She fretted over and reassured her son until he got the tears under control. He told her everything. Why he stopped calling and life with Kai in general were the hardest, and even then Izuku spared her the details. She didn't need to know the true depths of abuse Izuku was subjected to. Even with the Cliff Notes version, both of them still ended up in tears by the end. It was the most Izuku ever told anyone, but he didn't feel lighter for it. If anything, he felt ashamed for being weak enough to allow that to happen over and over and over again. It didn't help that Inko cried as much as she did, apologizing constantly for failing him, for not protecting him like a mother should. That of course made Izuku cry harder. He tried to tell her that it was his fault for falling out of touch. But she had cut him off as soon as he said, fault. Her voice had a fierceness to it that he rarely heard as she told him he was never to blame for Kai's failures as a human being, that everything that had happened was not his fault. For a time, Izuku believed her. Inko tried to convince her son to return home, telling him his room was still set up as he left it. He declined each time. He did want to go home where everything was simple and safe. He had Kirishima and Bakugo now. But more than that, he had a degree to get. It didn't matter that it was a Bachelor of Arts and not something career-specific. It would still be an accomplishment, and Izuku refused to let Kai take that away from him too. He did promise his mom that he would visit her during his next break, and that seemed to satisfy her. But only under the condition that he bring his new friends with him. After the agreement was made and they both swore they would keep in touch better, they said a tearful goodbye. Izuku wasn't sure how long he sat on Kirishima's bed staring at nothing. He had gone numb, his emotions overloaded again and again until he was empty. It was finally a soft knock that shook him from his stupor. Midoriya? Kirishima poked his head in. Once seeing for certain that he was off the phone, the redhead went in and hugged him tightly. Izuku stiffened and Kirishima let go immediately. Sorry, I probably should have asked first. No, it's okay, Izuku assured him quickly. It's been so long since I've had a hug. Kirishima looked at him for a long minute before hugging him tight again. Well, you can hug us. I love them, but Baku is like hugging a cactus. Not like I'm right here or anything, came the growl from the doorway. I'm sorry if I woke you up. Izuku looked down at his hands. His eyes were so red and puffy that they were hurting, especially his swollen one. I was already awake. Kirishima was still draped over Izuku and didn't plan to move for a while. Make yourself useful and grab the Kleenex so he can dry his face. You just leave it all right there? Bakugo asked as he grabbed the box from the nightstand where there was the classic setup of tissue, lotion, and nearby garbage can. You sound like Mina, Kirishima made a face. Jerking it is healthy. And you did it more than you did her? No wonder she left your butt. Harshed. And no, that's not why. I like having you guys for my friends. Izuku cut them off as he waved off a tissue and just used the hem of his shirt to wipe his face. But it's a little early to be learning that much about you. Kirishima laughed and apologized while Bakugo went back to standing in the doorway. He wasn't quite involved, but he wasn't leaving either. By this point, Izuku had relaxed into Kirishima's arms, and the redhead took that as an invitation to get more affectionate, pressing his cheek against Izuku's and just being an invasion of space. If you let him, he will do that non-stop, Bakugo warned. Feel free to push him out a window or something. Bakugo! Kirishima's grip had tightened and his eyebrows had pulled together. You can't just say shit like that to someone who came from a situation like he did. I know that's just your sense of humor, but he doesn't, so F off. Bakugo scowled at him, but shifted his gaze to Izuku. Wasn't meant that way. I know. It's okay. Even not knowing Bakugo that well, he felt like that was as close to an apology as he would get. But it didn't bother him either way. He wasn't sure if it was because he was just emotionally empty or if it actually wasn't a big deal. Kirishima was back smiling in a heartbeat. So how's your mom? She's good. She wants us to visit when we're on break. Us? Bakugo asked. Izuku nodded. She wants to thank you. For everything you've done. We didn't do much, Kirishima shrugged. You needed a place to go and we had a couch. You saved my life. I don't think you realize that. It's not an exaggeration. Kirishima made a dismissive noise. He finally ended the hug, but left his arm around his shoulders. That's what friends are for, bro. While you two broing up in here, I'm getting ready for work. Before either could reply, Bakugo vanished into the bathroom next door. A few minutes later, they could hear the shower turn on. Kirishima coaxed Izuku to joining him in the living room again. He offered to turn on the multiplayer video game Broforce, but Izuku declined. He had never actually played video games and was in no condition to learn. He was content to watch for a while, so Kirishima loaded his own solo save file. By the time Bakugo got out of his shower, Izuku had his eyes closed, unable to watch anymore. They hurt too much. At some point he fell asleep slumped against the arm of the couch. He was oblivious to Bakugo nudging Kirishima and the two of them whispering. Kirishima collected spare blankets and a pillow from the linen closet. He tried to lay a bottom blanket down so it was more comfortable than just laying on the couch, but Izuku was in the way. Bakugo carefully lifted the smaller man into his arms and held him as their friend tucked the blanket into the sides of the cushion. Izuku moved a little and Bakugo tensed, not sure how he was going to explain himself if he woke up. But all he did was shift slightly towards Bakugo and buried his nose into him. Kirishima looked at Bakugo and tried not to laugh as Izuku let out a content sigh in his sleep, apparently liking the scent of the blonde's cologne. Jackass, Bakugo mouthed before laying Izuku back down onto the couch. Kirishima tucked a blanket over top of him. Izuku burrowed down into the makeshift bed. Kirishima shut the TV off, leaving his game paused. He followed Bakugo to the kitchen, wrapped arms around him and inhaled deeply with a dreamy, dramatic sigh. Bakugo rolled his eyes and smacked Kirishima's forehead with his palm. Huff, douche face. He brushed past him and gathered his things for work. He tossed a wave to his friend and left the apartment, helmet in hand. When he got back after his shift around 2 in the morning, Kirishima had gone to bed and Izuku was still out cold on the couch, a freckled arm draped over his face. Bakugo quietly crept to the kitchen and grabbed leftover pizza. Not wanting to disturb him, he didn't heat it up. He simply carried it to his room to eat it cold. Izuku hadn't been this happy for it to be Saturday than he was the next morning. His head was cottony from crying and he had a bit of a headache. He laid in his couch bed for a few minutes simply because he could. He didn't have to leap up and make himself presentable, he didn't have to rush and make breakfast. In fact, he could hear the sound of movement in the kitchen and the smell of bacon had already permeated the air. He sat up and stretched, making his way to the bathroom to freshen up slightly before he made his way to the kitchen. Good morning, Bakugo, he yawned. The mentioned glanced over at him. Nice pajamas, he snorted. Izuku looked down, his jeans and t-shirt were rumpled from having been slept in. I don't remember falling asleep or making the bed up, but I slept good. Good for you. Like omelets. I love them. Do you need any help? Bakugo shrugged. You can pour the orange juice for everyone. Izuku looked for the glasses and completed his task while Bakugo finished cooking. The blonde went and banged his fist on Kirishima's door. It was exactly like the other day when he had startled Izuku awake when he had slept in Kirishima's room. Izuku didn't realize it at the time, but that would become their routine. He would be woken up every day to the smell of breakfast being made, they would eat breakfast together, and weekends would be spent being lazy with Kirishima playing games and Izuku reading ebooks. On weekdays, they would go to class while Bakugo went to bed. Kirishima's work ethic had improved just over a couple of days because of Izuku being a very diligent and thorough student. He was one of the top 3 students in his class in terms of marks, whereas Kirishima was more in the low to mid-60s. When he sat at the table with the books cracked open as soon as he got home, Kirishima felt obligated to do so as well. The pair would either order out or make dinner, then Bakugo would wake up, eat, and go to work. It was so nice to just be free. Spending time with Kirishima was the best sort of therapy. He was such a relaxed guy. He got easily excited over some things, but there wasn't any drama. There weren't rules or demands to be followed. He was all about hanging out and having laughs. It was hard to get used to, he would find out quickly. It was too lax. Izuku had gone from having a heavily dictated routine to having complete freedom. He continued cleaning the apartment because it was structure that he needed, but he let himself sit down whenever he wanted as a sort of mental rebellion to the life he once knew. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were Bakugo's nights off, but they didn't change the routine all that much. He was still up and making them breakfast first thing and tried to nap during the day. If Izuku was honest, he liked having Bakugo home the most. The air wasn't as lazy and relaxed as it was when it was just himself and Kirishima. It felt more secure in a way. Like it was Bakugo's domain and no one dared to cross it. They didn't talk very much unless Kirishima was in the room, so when one night Kirishima announced he was going out, they had a feeling there was going to be a lot of awkward silence. They sat on the couch, watching Kirishima bustle around the apartment, looking nervous. Izuku had never seen him like this, and he watched entertained. "All right," Kirishima announced after having taken a deep breath, wiping sweaty palms on his jeans. Bakugo stood up and went to his room. He returned a minute later and put silver packets in his hand. "Be safe, have fun, rock her world and all that. Your butt looks great in those. And good on not drowning in body spray this time." Kirishima's toothy smile was grateful. "Thanks, man. You're the best." "No sheet. Have fun, Kirishima. Good luck on your date." Izuku called from the couch. He smiled at his friend, which was easier to do now that the swelling on his face was gone and the bruises were fading. "Thanks." And then Kirishima was gone. Bakugo looked down at Izuku. "You want the TV?" "Me? Oh no, go ahead." Bakugo nodded and went to his room again. When he got back, he was peeling cellophane off of a video game case. He set the case on the coffee table while the system read the disc. He grabbed them both a drink and went back into the living room to find Izuku reading the case. "Knew you were a nerd, but you didn't strike me as a gamer," Bakugo commented as he grabbed a controller. "I've never played one before. I just love All Might. There's a few All Might games. Rise of the League of Villains just got released today." Izuku turned to the TV, enraptured the moment the menu popped up. He didn't notice Bakugo had moved until a controller landed on his lap. Huh. He was a little confused until he realized Bakugo was getting him to play. "I can't. I don't know how." "Might as well learn when it's something you're that interested in," Bakugo shrugged. Izuku nodded and picked up the controller, getting a feel for it. Izuku had been wanting to play as his favorite superhero All Might, but he let Bakugo pick first. He was surprised when the blonde picked Endeavor as his character, claiming he liked Endeavor's firepower better. So Izuku selected All Might with a huge grin on his face. It took him a little while to get the hang of the game and most of his playing was button mashing, but he was having fun. He was as animated as Bakugo, but less screaming and more laughing and cheering. Bakugo was good. Clearly he played a lot of games. He told Izuku the controls were the same as the other All Might games, which Izuku was welcome to borrow whenever he wanted. They played for hours and Bakugo was a surprisingly patient teacher. He yelled and swore at the villains on screen a lot, but he had no issues showing Izuku moves over and over again. He also shielded Izuku a lot when enemies attacked, so he could focus on turning All Might in the right direction. They were still playing when Kirishima got home. They had found a fighting system that worked for them and were making decent progress. They didn't even notice him until he hung over the back of the couch, arms around them. "Is that the new All Might game?" "Baku bro, Midori is good. Might even be better than you." "I don't know what I'm doing," Izuku laughed before screaming a little. "Help. Moonfish is gonna..." Kirishima watched with widening eyes as Endeavor ran across the screen to All Might's aid. Wait, Bakugo, you're not All Might. When the blonde said no, Kirishima stared at him. In the years they had been best friends, Kirishima had only ever gotten to play as All Might once, and that was when he'd had his tonsils removed. Go shower. You stink of section. Bakugo never took his eyes off the screen, but he could feel his best friend staring at him. He could still feel red eyes on him as Kirishima headed to the bathroom. He added, way to put out on the first date, where? Izuku choked on air. Bakugo! Bakucho is just jealous he isn't getting any D-dash, Kirishima laughed before heading off. Kirishima joined them again after a little while. He spent most of the time watching Bakugo in consideration more than anything else. When Bakugo went back to work a couple of days later, he left Izuku with all the All Might games he owned stacked by the TV in case he wanted to play. The two seemed to bond over the hero, having discussions either about the comic books or theories of that universe, even when they weren't playing games. After class and his homework was done, Izuku did in fact start playing All Might, The Hero Awakens, which was first chronologically, though he had to play in easy mode. Kirishima was about to open his mouth to poke around and ask hopefully subtle questions about their blossoming friendship when Izuku's phone rang. Izuku paused the game and reached for his phone. He nearly dropped it when he saw the name flashing on the screen. His face lost all color, but he answered it. Hello. There you are. Hello Deku, the voice on the other end spoke quietly. Izuku looked over at Kirishima, eyes wide and afraid. The redhead was on his feet immediately to both protect and comfort his friend. Tell him to sit back down. It was spoken quietly, but the angry clipped tone Izuku knew too well crept to the surface. Izuku's head snapped up and he tossed his phone away from him, looking at it as though it had bitten him. How did he know? Kirishima picked up the phone and listened. Kai's voice wasn't overly deep, but it was deceptively soft. Give the phone back to my beloved Deku, won't you? Before Kirishima could respond, Izuku held out his hand for the phone, as if knowing what Kai had said. When he had the phone back, he put it on speaker. What do you want, Kai? The tremble in his voice was undeniable, but he held firm, driven forward that he had addressed Kirishima as if he were able to see everything. I miss you, Kai sounded pouty, but the cold calculation couldn't be hidden. At least to Kirishima it couldn't. He couldn't read Izuku's face as he kept talking. I love you, baby. I just want you to come home. We can get past this. We've been through so much together, you can't just throw what we have away, Deku. Please, baby. Come home. No, Kai. We're over. Izuku reached out for Kirishima, needing the strength he didn't think he had. A warm hand enclosed his own and he fed off of the fact that Kirishima's hands were steady. I'm not going back. Oh, I had a feeling you would say that. I need you. I miss you so much. You're my world, my whole life. Kirishima moved closer to Izuku, wrapping his arms tightly around him. His voice was so quiet that the only reason Izuku heard him was because he was speaking directly into his ear. I've got you. You're safe here. I'm not going to let him get you. You know he won't stop hurting you. You said he'd kill you if you went back. Please stay here. Please live. Deku? Are you still there, baby? I'm here, Kai. And I'm staying here. I'm not going back to you. He hung up before any more lies could come through the phone. Turning slightly, he clung to Kirishima, his body shaking so hard he was practically convulsing. Panic attacks happened multiple times that night until finally Izuku was so exhausted from them that he just fell asleep. Kirishima sat with him for a couple of hours as he slept, playing games on his phone and just making sure for himself that Izuku was fine. Eventually he made his way to his own bed, and in the early hours of the morning, neither one heard the slight scratching sound from the lock on the front door. Everything was dark when Bakugo arrived home from work, both in the apartment where everyone was sleeping and in the hall where the light was burnt out. He dared the landlord to say anything about the scratches on the lock. It wasn't his fault he couldn't see what he was doing, but it was what he'd expect after the night he had. He moved quietly to the kitchen and flicked the light on in there. He hadn't wanted to wake Izuku while he was sleeping on the couch. He set his helmet on the counter and hung his jacket on the back of a chair. He rummaged through the freezer for pizza pockets and stuck them in the microwave. He hit the minute button, the sound ringing out louder than it seemed it ever did before. He had never cared about waking Kirishima. That guy slept like a rock. The beep never would have been heard by him. But the same couldn't be said about Izuku. When the beep rang out, a gasp came from the couch. Bakugo poked his head around the divider for the kitchen. "It's just me." "Bakugo," Izuku panted as he willed his heartbeat to go back normal. Bakugo punched in the remaining time to cook his food and hit start. As his meal began turning in the microwave, he walked through the living room towards the hall where the bedrooms were. "Sorry, nerd," he said before disappearing around the corner. He came back out as the microwave beeped in completion, clad only in basketball shorts and a muscle shirt. Izuku watched him from where he was still sitting up on the couch. He knew Kai was out there and that he knew where he was. But in that moment, in the safety of the apartment with Bakugo padding around, it felt like that threat was far away. It wasn't that Bakugo had bulging muscles, but everything about him, from his muscular structure to the confidence and assurance he walked with, noted that he was a veteran scrapper. Kirishima, Izuku felt, would fight for him if the situation came up, but he felt protected with Bakugo there. No words were exchanged until Bakugo re-entered the living room balancing his plate and a full glass. After setting his stuff down, Bakugo plopped himself onto the couch. Izuku's legs would have been crushed had he not moved them in time. Bakugo held his plate out, offering a pizza pocket, but Izuku declined. After a few minutes of quiet eating, the green-haired man spoke. "So, dinner of champions, I see." "Yeah," Bakugo shrugged. "I didn't get my lunch and I'm too lazy to eat real food." "You don't make yourself dinner, but you cook breakfast for us?" Izuku loved Bakugo's cooking. He had never had breakfast that tasted better than Bakugo's. He even out-cooked Inko Midoriya. The blonde shrugged, focusing on his food and not the fact Izuku was sitting with his chin on his knees and holding his feet looking oddly cute. "I've been making Kiri breakfast for years. Not gonna stop now. I work late, so half the time I haven't gone to bed when he gets up." "That's kind of you. Tell anyone and I'll kill you." Bakugo glanced at him, having realized a moment too late that that joke was in poor taste, even though he hadn't heard of that evening's events. Izuku gave him a small smile in assurance. "What is it that you do?" "To work, I just realized I never asked." "Bartender at the Vibe." "Cool." The enthusiasm caught Bakugo off guard a little. "What's it like?" "Not as interesting as you're making it seem." He took a sip of his iced tea before continuing. "It's all just mixing drinks, watching drunk people try to get laid, making a guy roofie himself, all while trying to act nice enough that you get a tip." "Roofie himself?" Bakugo sighed with irritation, not at Izuku but the situation. There's been this fuckhead going from club to club causing trouble. We got lucky that we were his next stop. He targets a girl, roofies her, gets what he wants and vanishes like the fucking weasel he is. Doesn't matter that we're a fucking gay bar. A girl is a girl, I guess. So I saw him slip one into her drink, scaled the counter, grabbed him and forced him to drink it. "Do you make it a habit of being a hero?" Izuku asked softly. Whipping his head to look at him, Bakugo was eloquent as always. "Huh? Nerd, you must still be asleep. I ain't a DMN hero. You helped rescue me. That was Kirishima. You saved a girl tonight. And I could lose my job because of it. Not to mention possible assault charges. My net is scum enough to try it, but I've got enough clubs and, unfortunately, probably girls to testify against him, so I don't think it'll come to it. Hopefully a plea of defense will be enough." Izuku didn't speak for a while and Bakugo thought he might have fallen back to sleep. He took a sip of iced tea before looking over at him. Izuku was just looking at him with those big green eyes of his. It was too dark, but he could have sworn something like admiration was in his eyes. "Do I have something on my face?" Bakugo's voice had gotten quieter because for some reason the moment seemed too fragile to speak too loudly. Izuku shook his head a little, voice hushed like the blonde's. "I was just thinking. Kirishima's right about you. You are good people." Bakugo looked at him for a long moment, face only illuminated by the light from the kitchen. The loose waves of his dark green hair were wilder than usual, a result from having been sleeping. He was just sitting there looking at him with those eyes. Bakugo hadn't realized that with the bruising on his face cleared up, Izuku was, well, he was worth looking at. In that moment all the teasing from Kirishima when Izuku wasn't around clicked into place, and other things he did over the last week that he hadn't admitted to himself. Catering breakfast to what Izuku liked, letting him play characters he never shared, putting an effort in to change his behavior so as not to scare Izuku, the feeling in his chest when hearing him laugh, how distracted he would get if he even walked by the bathroom after Izuku showered because the scent was just distracting. Despite it being delayed, Bakugo scoffed and got to his feet, eager to put some space between them. He took his plate and glass to the sink and left them there until he got around to it later in the day. "So, did you get to any of the games I left out?" he called from the other room. "I started one but didn't get very far." "Get stuck?" "No. It was Kai." "Well, he called me today." Bakugo was back at the couch in a heartbeat, his eyes narrowed and hard. "What?" The rage came off of him in waves. "That motherfucker. I swear to if that happens again, you FNG call me. Or get Kiri too." "I'm fine, Bakugo. I told him I wasn't going back." "FNG right you're not," he growled. Izuku reached out and touched his hand as if to tame a savage beast as Bakugo searched his face for any signs of distress. "You doing okay?" Izuku nodded. "I wasn't but I'm doing better now. Though you gave me a heart attack with the microwave." He meant it as a joke but Bakugo looked sheepish. Bakugo held his arms open in an apology, and Izuku shifted up to hug him. Kirishima was very affectionate and huggy. Bakugo seemed to avoid them, so this was the first one Izuku had gotten from him. He wasn't sure how he would handle hugging someone other than Kirishima, who was like a ray of sunshine, because he wasn't used to hugs. Kai stopped giving them a while ago. Hugs were supposed to be warm and comforting. Sometimes Kai did put his arms around Izuku, but it was tense and controlling, a tactic only used to remind Izuku how trapped he really was. Other than from Kirishima, the last kind hug he had been given was from his mom the day he moved out. As it turned out, he had nothing to worry about. If Izuku felt safe with Bakugo in the same room, the feeling only intensified being in his arms. Almost immediately his limbs felt gooey as his body relaxed fully. "He knows where we live," Izuku told him, face muffled by Bakugo's shoulder. When he called, Kirishima stood up and Kai told him to sit back down. "He's watching me." That very thought had induced panic attack after panic attack throughout the evening. Now he was able to say it devoid of any emotion. Almost as if he was separated from what was going on. Bakugo's arms tightened around him, and his voice had a low growl to it as he spoke. "Let him try getting in here. Or go after Kiri or you. It'll be the last thing he does." His words felt like a promise, and the rumble of his voice was felt in Izuku's chest. The smaller man looked up at him through long lashes and smiled at. Bakugo's face felt like it was on fire. Even though they were hugging, it only really clicked in his head just how close they really were. Had he not realized that Izuku was kind of attractive, he would have been fine. All he could focus on now was the feel of him in his arms, the scent of his shampoo, and his lips were way too close. Pushing Izuku away slightly to end the hug, Bakugo cleared his throat a little. "Kirishima was wrong about something," Izuku said softly. "What's that?" "Hugging you isn't like hugging a cactus." Izuku laughed softly. "Not that I hug many cacti." Unsure of how to answer that, Bakugo did the only thing he could think to do. Leaning over the back of the couch, he knocked Izuku to the floor. "Get out of my bed, you dim nerd." He climbed over the back and laid down. He grabbed the blankets from where they were tangled with Izuku on the floor. He turned his back to the other man, face ablaze, hoping the cushions hid it. But what? Izuku looked up at the broad back filling his field of vision. He had no idea what just happened. They were fine. They'd had a moment even. Then he was on his but on the floor. "I'm not coming home and waking you up. I ain't listening to your DMN hero speeches anymore." Izuku stammered a few times. He was still so confused. "What? But that's my bed." Door at the end of the hall. Bakugo's voice was gruff and muffled by the pillow. "Oh, okay." He realized then that Bakugo was trading beds with him. Izuku slowly got up and made his way to the hall where he paused to look back at Bakugo. "Thank you." He turned to walk forward, but he couldn't resist tossing Hiro over his shoulder, a smile on his lips. Bakugo grumbled, "Shut the F up, you dim nerd," and flipped his middle finger at him. Izuku walked past the open bathroom door and Kirishima's closed bedroom door. At the end of the short hallway was a closed door. He felt awkward about just walking into someone else's room, but Bakugo had given him permission to. Turning the doorknob, Izuku stepped into the dark room. He flicked the light switch and took in the room. His own room had been immaculately clean with everything tucked away neatly. Kirishima's looked like a cyclone hit it, with clothing all over the floor, schoolwork everywhere and anywhere, and full of plates he was too lazy to bring to the kitchen. Bakugo's was somewhere in between. The bed wasn't made, but the blanket was still mostly in place. The corner was turned down in a way that looked more inviting than anything. The dresser had a few things scattered on the top, but the floor was clear. Heavy curtains clearly meant to block out sunlight hung from the window. After mapping out his path, Izuku turned the light off. He slowly shuffled to the side of the bed. He found his way and climbed into the bed, practically melting into it. It was far more comfortable than he was expecting. After weeks of sleeping on the couch, he had forgotten how comfortable a bed could be. Pulling the blankets up high, he burrowed into the pillows. With the scent of Bakugo all around him, he felt as safe as he did when they hugged. He had noticed for a while that Bakugo smelled nice. There was a myriad of scents he had tried to place during their hug, but he was afraid of coming across as creepy. Now that he was alone, he could bury his face in the pillow and figure out each and every one. He had smelled wood smoke on him before, but now he realized that was his cologne. A little more faint was gunmetal explosion body wash, and he could barely smell a faded hint of marijuana. The scents swirled in Izuku's nose in a heady mixture. All the scents were having an effect on him that he refused to acknowledge. Closing his eyes, it took a little while before sleep overtook Izuku. It took him to a land of dreams involving Katsuki Bakugo that would make it impossible to look him in the eyes come morning. Kirishima noticed the change in the two the second he sat his butt down for breakfast. Neither Izuku nor Bakugo would look at each other. The air wasn't tense, so Kirishima knew they hadn't fought. There was just something different. They seemed almost shy with each other, which was not something he saw often on Bakugo. He was dying to ask what happened while he had slept, but he knew if he just blurted the question, Bakugo would clam up and ruin all of this progress. Kirishima didn't know what this was, but he knew it was progress. Curiously, they didn't seem to notice the other was being weird. They were too caught up in their own heads. It all clicked into place for Kirishima when Bakugo brought plates of omelets to the table. Kiri was about to comment that they sure were eating a lot of omelets lately when Bakugo started to set a plate down in front of Izuku that had the world's most perfectly made omelet on it. The blonde looked at Kiri, who was staring at him, blushed a little and shoved the plate at his best friend so hard the food fell off the plate. Izuku blinked in confusion as a plate with a less than perfect looking breakfast plopped on it was set in front of him. He didn't care what his food looked like, it was just that the interaction confuddled him. Kirishima looked at the presentation differences and thought back to a conversation he had had with Bakugo some days prior. As soon as Izuku headed to the shower after eating, Kirishima helped clear off the table. "Hey Baku. Yeah. Did you really put garnishes on the omelets? If, do you care, shitty hair?" Bakugo started filling up the sink to wash the dishes. "Food is food. Don't like it, don't eat it." "It's not that I don't like it. You just never cared about making it look good." Kirishima raised his hands defensively. "Why does it matter?" With Bakugo being as evasive as he was, Kiri couldn't help but tease. "Careful. Midoriya might think you're crushing on him." He gave his best friend a wink. "Huh? Like I'd like that nerd." "Oh my god, you do." "No, fuckface. Pretty sure I'd know if I did, and I don't." "Don't know or don't like him?" Kiri bumped him with his hip. "I swear to F, I will drown you in this sink." Kirishima had noticed Bakugo doing things he didn't seem to realize he was doing, like omelette garnishes. But when their eyes met, it was like Bakugo realized what he was doing and gave Kiri the one meant for Izuku. Which meant, "Oh my god." Izuku and Bakugo both jumped, one with his hand over his heart and the other glaring angrily. "The F's your problem, dumbass?" Oh, I just realized I forgot to do today's homework. He let out a fake laugh, but Izuku didn't seem to notice how forced it was. We did it last week as soon as we got home so we wouldn't have to worry about it, Izuku supplied, helpful as ever. Oh right. There was that awkward laugh again. Silly me. I guess you still aren't used to doing your homework so diligently. Izuku smiled at him before turning his attention to Bakugo. Green eyes still didn't quite meet red as he spoke. This was delicious as always, Bakugo. Thank you. Bakugo gave a tc a noise in response and his ears turned a little red. Kirishima was practically vibrating with giddiness. His shark-toothed smile couldn't possibly get any wider. He grinned at Bakugo, as if trying to tell him that he knew Bakugo's secret. Even as Bakugo glared, Kiri just kept grinning until his face looked like it could break in half. His little bro was in love. Well, big bro if they went by the fact Bakugo was older, but he was emotionally stunted so Kiri considered him the little bro. You're in a really good mood today, Kirishima, Izuku observed. The redhead put his chin on his hand and looked at him then across the table at Bakugo. Today's just such a good day. The sun is shining, there are feelings to feel. What a beautiful time to be alive. Baku my bro. It's also a beautiful time for you to die. Kirishima just kept grinning, even as they finished eating. Izuku excused himself to get dressed and Bakugo immediately started collecting dishes. He didn't trust that sharp smile. He dropped them into the sink and started running the water. You should make him blueberry waffles tomorrow. Kiri leaned against the kitchen doorway holding the remaining dishes from breakfast. What? Midoriya. You should make him blueberry waffles. You make good omelets but waffles are your real speciality if you're trying to woo him. Because you totally have a thing for him. I know I said it before but it's true and you finally realize it. Now admit it. That's what this is about? Kirishima was a bit surprised Bakugo admitted it so easily. After taking the dishes from Kirishima, he put his arm around Kirishima's shoulders, bringing his forearm across his neck and holding him tightly. Tell him and I'll end you. Bro, you know I won't ruin it for you. His tone was serious. I'm just happy for you. I might grin at you a lot but it's up to you to confess to him. Which I'll never do. Why not? Because I don't love him. He's just nice to look at. After all he's been through, he deserves someone that loves him. Kirishima gave a knowing smile that Bakugo couldn't see from his angle. I can always see if he likes you back. Bakugo's grip around his neck tightened. Or you can live to see another day. Kirishima just beamed at him and turned his head to kiss his cheek. Baku pushed him away. Go brush your teeth. You stink. What's that? Go into the bathroom while your boyfriend is changing. Kiri stretched out the syllables in boyfriend and wiggled his butt a little. You're actually the worst fucker on this planet, Bakugo growled. You know I meant after. 'Cause you want to be in there. Want to be in where? Izuku asked as he popped into the kitchen. Bakugo immediately turned to the sink to start washing. I'm just harassing Baku. Are you ready for class? Teeth! Bakugo yelled. Before you kill someone with that stank but breath. Yes, mother. Kirishima stuck his tongue out before going to the bathroom. After a minute, Bakugo casually asked, So how did you sleep? Amazing! Bakugo looked over and Izuku was smiling at him. Thank you so much. Your bed's really comfy. I know. Bakugo kept his back to him. He had no intention of telling Izuku of his crush, so he didn't need to see how red his face got over how it sounded that he was in his bed. He always got red easily for the few days after realizing he liked someone, but then the blushing went down as he beat his feelings back down. Before he could say anything more, a minty fresh Kirishima rejoined them. Ready, Midoriya? Izuku nodded and went to put his shoes on. Kiri gave Bakugo a grin and followed their friend to the door. They left, both tossing farewells over their shoulders, and Bakugo was left alone in the kitchen wondering if Kirishima would keep his promise. If there was one thing Eijiro Kirishima could do, it was keep his best friend's secrets. Even when faced with fascinating facts that he was not expecting. What do you mean you slept in his bed? Kirishima hissed during class. The lesson had given way to a work party. Not like that. Izuku yelled before. Realizing everyone had looked at him. Sorry guys. He lowered his voice. Not like that. He woke me up when he got home, so he just told me to sleep in there so he didn't disturb me. It wasn't a big deal. Is that why you were all weird at first this morning? Izuku shrugged. I didn't realize I was. Their prof wandered closer to them, so Izuku pointed at Kirishima's textbook as though he were helping him with his work. So, is this going to be a regular thing? Kirishima asked, hoping the curiosity wasn't too strong in his voice. I have no idea, Izuku admitted. That's going to get awful cozy on his days off, Kirishima mused aloud, wiggling his eyebrows. Izuku elbowed him hard. Not gonna happen. Ever. Kirishima, Izuku sighed a little. I'm a little more concerned with trying not to die than getting a new boyfriend. That sobered Kirishima up a bit. You think he'll still go after you? It wasn't a question. I'm his property, and I made him angry. It's only a matter of time. There was a sad sort of resolve to his voice. You aren't property. You're the sweetest, most genuine person I've ever met. How'd you even end up with a loser like him? We were high school sweethearts. He even did a victory lap so we could graduate together. He was a bit controlling, but we were happy. I didn't understand what he was doing at the time, but to be fair, I truly believe he didn't either. There was little things like he got mad when I went to the movies with my best friend. She and I were friends before I met him, and I'm as gay as they come, but he still got upset. He needed to control everything I said or did, but at the time I thought he was afraid to be alone. It was always little things, and I think the older we got, the more intentional his actions became. He'd laugh any time I'd try something new. He ate the cookies I burned but mocked me for trying to make him a dessert I thought he'd like. I couldn't wear certain things in public because I looked too nice. He'd leave for hours in the middle of the night and make me feel like I was paranoid and a bad person for not trusting him when I knew he loved me. He slowly had cut me off from everyone, but I assumed it was the germs thing. He didn't want people around because they could get him sick or contaminated. I didn't think it could be more than that. It wasn't until we moved away and he hit me that I started to pick up on what he had been doing all those years. But by then I was cut off from everyone who truly cared for me, Mom and Ochako. But it still took my life being on the line for me to leave. Izuku looked so sad as he told his story. He didn't know how to tell Kirishima that he missed Kai, not the Kai he had run away from, but the one he thought he was with when he was young and naive. The one that made him laugh, seemed interested in what he had to say, but not because he was looking for something to use against him later, or just wanted to be everywhere. Izuku was because he loved him and wanted to be around him, not a manipulation strategy, the one that needed him. He didn't think Kirishima would understand. The redhead gave him a few minutes of dwelling before speaking. It doesn't matter how long it took you, so long as you left. And with that behind you, you've opened yourself up to a better life. You talked to your mom, you've got me in Blasty, and I'm sure if you called up that Ochako chick, you'd have her back too. We're all here because you're worth more than he made you think you were. Izuku's eyes filled with tears, but before he could respond, their prof spoke up. All right, all of you get out of here. Don't forget to have Chapter 13 read and questions answered for next class. Izuku wiped his eyes as Kirishima closed all their books and started putting them in their bags. I have to stop at the store before we head back. Oh, I have my Genid now, Izuku sniffled as he grabbed his bag. Want me to come back to get you when you're done? Izuku blinked. You would do that? Why wouldn't I? I like having you around. And I feel like I can speak for Baku when I say he does too. Can't let anything happen to our new roomie. True to his word, Kirishima was hanging by Izuku's classroom when the class was over. He was leaning against the wall waiting when a familiar shock of pink hair stepped out of the room. He smiled at her, she smiled politely back at him and continued walking. Thankfully Izuku stepped out a minute later. Man, you didn't tell me Mino was in your class, Kirishima whined. You know her? Yeah, we dated for almost a year. Has she talked shit about me? The only ex I've heard her mentioned was a troublemaker who took longer to get ready than she did. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at his friend's crestfallen expression. What's that face for? She said it was her, not me. Izuku laughed more. He tried to comfort his friend, but it was easier said than done when said friend kept being melodramatic over everything he said until they were both laughing heartily. Unfortunately, in their carefree moment, neither noticed a parked car or a man inside watching their every move. Izuku didn't receive any more calls from Kai after the one Kirishima was there for, and for that he was grateful. What he wasn't grateful for, however, was getting a text exactly 1 minute after his alarm went off that simply said, "Good morning, Deku." Izuku considered himself a morning person. Not the loud, cheerful singing sort, but he enjoyed waking up early and making the most of his day. Kai knew this about him. He knew how Izuku used to wake up early and have a tea before making breakfast for them both, and he allowed him that. Kai also knew that a simple message would set him off kilter for the rest of the day, which was the least he deserved given all the trouble he had been causing him lately. It frustrated Izuku that it was true, and it frustrated him more that he knew that Kai knew it was true. It felt contaminating in a way to get a text from him while laying in Bakugo's bed, even though he slept alone. Bakugo slept in the bed during the day, even on his days off, and in an irrational way, Izuku was afraid that the darkness Kai spread would get to Bakugo if he stayed in the bed any longer. He leapt out of bed and made it before heading to the living room. He still kept his clothes in a bag in the living room and changed in the bathroom. It felt too forward to move his stuff into Bakugo's room, and he didn't figure the blonde would want his space invaded more than it already was. So he grabbed a change of clothes and tossed a "good morning" over his shoulder in reply to the same greeting that came from the kitchen. Going into the hall, the bathroom was the first room, the Kirishima's, with Bakugo's at the end. His towel was already hanging on the back of the bathroom door. As he ran the water to let it warm up before he got in, Izuku looked at the text from Kai again. It was hard for him not to reply. He had been with Kai for so long, and he knew what happened if he didn't answer. He just had to remind himself that that wasn't his life anymore. Kai no longer controlled his every breath, and if he didn't want to reply, he didn't have to. He deleted the text without replying and got in the shower before he could consider replying regardless. It was a hard decision to make, and Izuku was proud of himself for doing it. Kai knew where he was living, and somehow knew, 3 floors up, what went on inside the apartment. That terrified him, not just for himself, but for Kirishima and Bakugo as well. He didn't dare open the curtains anymore, and once he started feeding a couple stray cats that congregated outside, he only did it while Bakugo was out on the balcony watching him. He was such a hassle to everyone. It would be safer for them if Izuku returned to Kai. Maybe he wouldn't kill him after all. It would be worth the beatings if it kept his friends safe. He didn't know his friends for long, but he knew that wouldn't work. Kirishima would track him down in a heartbeat and play hero. And Bakugo, well, he seemed pretty upset Kai called, and so he would probably join Kirishima on a rescue mission, but he wasn't completely sure. He didn't know where he stood in the blonde's mind. To be fair though, he wasn't sure where Bakugo stood in his mind either. Especially after that dream the other night. He did find the blonde cute, but also found cute didn't quite cut it. Especially when he was parading around in just his boxers as he sometimes did in the mornings. Even though he wasn't looking at pursuing Bakugo romantically, he'd have to be crazy not to appreciate the toned shoulders tapering down to a trim waist. But Bakugo was more than just a firm body to subtly stare at. Izuku seemed to think people didn't exist that made him feel like he could do anything, go anywhere, or say whatever and feel confident that nothing could hurt him. He had been afraid of Bakugo at first because he was loud and aggressive, but Bakugo was putting in an effort to not be like that around him. Sometimes when he would start to get loud, his eyes would cut to Izuku and he would quiet himself down. Kai had taken so much from Izuku already. His confidence and sense of self, his friends, his chance at being normal, even his body. Izuku looked down at his hands as the water ran over them. Scars covered them, and they went up his arms and across his chest. There were small burn marks across his back. Even his but had a scar across one cheek where Kai had whipped him in the name of being Kai. His legs were clear though. Kai didn't care about marking where hair could hide it. It was a good thing Bakugo had no interest in him. Other than a passing comment Kirishima had made about Bakugo not getting any D-dash, Izuku didn't think he liked guys anyway. He didn't seem to show attraction to anyone, but it may have been because Bakugo didn't really go out. It was work, sleep, repeat for the most part. But even if he did like guys, Izuku was hardly his type. He was too broken to be anyone's type. With a sigh, Izuku scrubbed his body. He was stupid for even following that rabbit hole of thoughts. Every day he moved on more and more from the disaster that was his old life, but he was far from being in a place where he could start considering prospective relationships. As he told Kirishima a while ago, he was more concerned with staying alive than getting a new boyfriend. Plus, taking time to himself might be worthwhile. He wasn't really sure who he was anymore, and he needed to be his own person instead of a puppet. There was no way he could meet someone who would be okay with his search to find himself. The guy would be attracted to the version of him he met, not the version he would become, because he didn't know that version yet. And Izuku would also have to tell him all about his past. What if this mystery man didn't like that much baggage? Bakugo already knew all the crap he came with. Izuku shook his head. He shouldn't even be thinking of stuff like that. Screw Bakugo. He blushed a little even though he was alone in the bathroom. Screwing Bakugo wasn't something he'd be against, which was half the reason he was having this internal struggle. Maybe it wasn't even worth debating? If Bakugo wasn't interested, Izuku gained a friend that had given him more support in the weeks they'd known each other than some other people he knew most of his life. If he was interested, maybe he would wait for Izuku to stand on his own for a while. Or maybe there would never be a right time, and they'd just have to work with what they had. But there was no point in thinking anything like that until he knew where Bakugo stood, which made the entire shower musing pointless. With a dejected sigh, Izuku turned the water off and stepped out of the shower. He dried himself off and got dressed before heading to the kitchen. Was Kirishima awake and talking to Bakugo? Izuku was a little confused because Kirishima never woke up on his own. But there he was, sitting on the counter. When he saw Izuku approaching, his sunny smile lit up the room. "There you are. Your shower muttering woke me up. Then you were in there forever, so I thought I'd come out and chat with my bro. I'm so sorry." Izuku apologized, embarrassed that what he was thinking he was apparently saying out loud. Did Kiri hear what he said? Did Bakugo? You and Baku both, man. I swear your showers are getting longer and longer. Must be the whole sharing a bed thing. Huh? The F, you saying hair for brains. Just that you can't really JRK off in bed if you guys share the bed, even if it's at different times, because that would be gay. Oh wait, Kirishima started laughing. Izuku went bright red and denied everything. He really wasn't doing that. Bakugo's ears were on fire, but his cheeks themselves were only slightly rosy. Surprising both Kirishima and Izuku, he didn't get mad or say anything for that matter. He just kept his attention on the food he was cooking. A large waffle griddle was in use, and it seemed like it would make waffles roughly the size of a plate. The light flicked off, but Bakugo kept it cooking. And cooking. And cooking. The distinct smell of burning food started to fill the air. Kirishima thought Bakugo wasn't paying attention and went to open it. A wooden spoon that had been used for mixing batter came down across his knuckles. Kirishima yelped and pulled his hand back. The waffle cooked some more. Finally, Bakugo lifted the lid to reveal a mostly charred waffle. He took it out of the griddle and set it on a plate. He handed it to Kirishima. Eat up, motherfucker. Bakugo hadn't been sure what to do. That was exactly why his showers had gotten longer. Even though he didn't make a sound, Kiri's room was on the other side of the shower wall, so he knew when the water ran. But that didn't mean Izuku needed to know his shower activities. Denying it would only make it more obvious that Kiri was right, so he did the only thing he could think of. Izuku burst out laughing at Kirishima's expression. The heartiness of it made Bakugo's lips twitch until he too started laughing. Kirishima tried to hold his pout as long as he could, but he caught the laughing bug too. After a few minutes, their laughter finally died down. Kirishima hopped off the counter to grab syrup, but he didn't miss the shared smile between Bakugo and Izuku. He used the fridge door to hide his own smile. Bakugo had cleaned the griddle of charred bits and made some for Izuku and himself. With leftover batter, he made another for Kirishima, so he actually got decent food. Decent was an understatement. In addition to it being plate-sized, there were blueberries in the batter. Dollops of whipped cream covered each one and then was smothered with more blueberries. Before he could stop himself, Izuku ummed as he took the first bite. Bakugo looked up with wide eyes. He glanced over at Kirishima to make sure he had heard it too. The redhead looked smug. After all, the waffles had been his idea. Now he owed Kirishima. He waited until the two of them went to class before hopping into the shower. This way Kiri couldn't say anything about how long he took. As perfect as their waffle moment has been that morning, it wasn't meant to last. Other than the text he deleted, Izuku didn't hear from Kai. But Bakugo did. When he came home from work, he ate a sandwich and played a bit of his own save file of the new All Might video game. After a little while he turned everything off and stretched out on the couch to sleep. The street light was too bright. It never shone directly into the apartment because of the floor they were on, but they were still bright enough to let some light enter, which was partially why they had curtains. He'd have to talk to Izuku about closing the curtains fully. Demon Nerd was the only one who ever opened them. Bakugo got up to close it when he noticed a folded white piece of paper. Bakugo. It wasn't any writing he recognized. Kirishima's was so bad it was almost illegible unless one was used to it. Izuku's was bubbly and easy to read. These letters were all in capitals, close together with pronounced points. Bakugo reached to grab it, but it was taped to the outer glass. Cautiously Bakugo opened the balcony door. There weren't any locks on it because the building just didn't have them. The balcony was clear and Bakugo grabbed the note. He brought it inside to read. Bakugo, thank you for looking after my dear Izuku. It was so nice of you to calm him down the other day when the two of you cut through the park when you took a walk to the store and he thought he saw me. Or how you stand on the balcony and watch him leave food for the stray cats, as if you could protect him from there. But now it's time his rebellious phase ends. He's coming home, Bakugo, and you would be wise not to get in my way. It was unsigned, but Bakugo knew exactly who it was from. He all but ran to his room and quietly opened the door. Izuku was the only one in there, sound asleep on what had become his side. Bakugo's bed was a double and he always slept on the outer side. Izuku was sleeping on the side closest to the wall, arms wrapped around Bakugo's pillow as he cuddled it in his sleep. The blonde watched him for a moment, taking in how peaceful the slim man looked. He closed the door softly before going into Kirishima's room. Kiri, wake up. Kirishima grumbled and turned over. Bakugo didn't hide the urgency from his voice as he spoke again. Ijiro, get up. Now. Kirishima sat up sleepily, a large yawn showing his sharp shark teeth escaped him. What's up, Baku bro? Bakugo dropped the note onto his lap. Kirishima turned on the lamp and had to focus his eyes a couple times before he could read it. As soon as he realized what he was reading, he was wide awake. We should go to the police, Bakugo. We have no proof of anything except this note. They won't take it seriously. Tomorrow I'm locking the balcony door. We need to keep him safe. When did any of this even happen? Kirishima motioned to the note. The park was like a week and a half ago. And Midoriya feeds the cats every day. Bakugo's expression was bewildered. How did he not notice? He takes hot dogs down to them. He's close to petting one. Where was the note? Taped to the window. I don't even know how he got the FING note there. Climbed the balconies maybe? How did nobody see this? Bakugo paced the room as he spoke, hand in his wild hair. He was trying so hard to keep his voice down. And the curtain was open. Did Midoriya leave it open? Or was that if an ass-rag piece of sheet motherfucking F in my house? Kirishima hadn't seen him quite like this before. He had seen Bakugo angry more than he had seen him happy, but this was a new kind of rage. He dreaded the words about to leave his mouth. Midoriya hasn't opened the curtains since that call when he told me to sit down. The sound of Bakugo's teeth grinding was all that could be heard. I'm going to tear every place apart until I find that BSE. And then you'll get arrested for Band E property defacement, and knowing you probably assault and or manslaughter if you thought someone was hiding him. And then he'd be running around free and you wouldn't be able to protect Midoriya anymore. What the hell am I supposed to do then? Kirishima shook his head. Other than go to the police, I don't know, man. After a minute he added, are you going to tell him? Bakugo shook his head. He's finally relaxed and he seems happy. I can't take that from him, not after all he's been through. And he won't question 20 locks on the balcony door? Kirishima pointed out as he worried a piece of hair that fell into his face. You had a dream about him getting taken and wouldn't let it go until I added locks. Why me? Because nothing can scare me, Kiri. That's always been my job, to be cocky and not fazed by anything. He already knows I don't show sheet. If I act worried at all, he'll pick up on it. This has to be you. Kirishima nodded. Fine. I'll take this one. But just talk to me, okay? You are scared and that's okay. He means a lot to you already. You don't have to protect him alone. When Bakugo gave a nod, he asked, So how are you gonna deal with this guy? Bakugo's smile was slow and dark. I'm going to burn that motherfucker alive. Kirishima kept true to his word and acted like he had a nightmare about Izuku being kidnapped. He hugged and fretted over the green-haired one nonstop, but still in a way that was believable for Kiri. So Bakugo headed out while they were in class and added 5 locks that could only be locked and unlocked from the inside. Even with the locks, Bakugo stopped sleeping at night, squeezing in a couple hours of sleep while they were all at class or doing whatever on the weekends. It was getting to him. He constantly had gray bags under his eyes. However, there was no immediate communication from Kai. It seemed he would wait until they all relaxed before striking again, as that seemed to be his style. Typically, once or twice a week he would send a text to Izuku. They would come in from different numbers, but he always called Izuku Deku, so there was no denying who it was from. It would mess him up for a little while, keeping him on edge and hypervigilant to everything until he had been in flight or flight mode for so long that his body would just shut down. Those times usually ended with Bakugo having to carry him to bed. Kirishima had offered to grab him many times, but Bakugo was always a step ahead of him, already scooping him up by the time Kirishima offered. When Izuku woke up he was good to go, as though the boogeyman had been defeated. He had another couple days of peace and he wasn't going to waste them by cowering. He was going to get out and live his life. He did that by doing things like grocery shopping with Kirishima. It was maybe not the most exciting thing to do, but it was necessary and Izuku always liked doing that kind of thing. He found it more fun than going to a party or something. His mom always said that was because he was responsible like an adult, even when he was only 5 and helping her. Kirishima just said he was lame. Since he had come to live with Bakugo and Kirishima, a lot more dinner was being made at home. Kirishima couldn't cook very much, so he usually just ordered takeout. Izuku preferred to cook, so they cooked together and slowly the redhead was improving. It had been weird for Bakugo to adjust to real food as soon as he woke up. Dinner for breakfast, something light when he got home, and breakfast for dinner. But it was a routine he fell into and was always curious which of Izuku's meals he would wake up to. Kirishima always helped, but Bakugo always called it Midoriya's cooking because he had tasted Kirishima's disasters enough to know there was no way he could make something like that. Bakugo didn't compliment the meals a lot. It wasn't really his style, but he always ate all of it and sometimes even had a second helping, which was praise enough. So while they grocery shopped, Izuku picked out a couple things to try to make meals from. He always wanted to make 1 or 2 new things a week. They took their time shopping but were still done at a reasonable hour. They would get home just in time to make dinner. Kirishima paid for the groceries. It was always he or Bakugo that did. Izuku's mom sent Kirishima money regularly to give to her son the minute she found out he and Kai had shared accounts and therefore he didn't have a penny to his name anymore. He had tried to pay for groceries or pitch in for rent, but the other men shot that idea down, saying they'd rather he cook and clean than pay, although he did have to pay for his own hot dogs to feed the stray cats with. Izuku went along with it, but insisted he at least pay for the zip on the way home. It was easier to call for a ride than to try and carry their bags back. The fact that it was cheaper than a taxi was just a bonus. He booked the ride on his phone and after a couple minutes, he and Kirishima went to stand in front of the store with their cart full of bags. "Oh, that's the car," Kirishima pointed before waving to flag it over. The windows were heavily tinted, so at first they weren't sure if the driver had even seen them. But sure enough, the car made its way to them. "I'll get him to pop the trunk." Kirishima opened the back seat door and poked his head in to ask. "Of course." The voice was too smooth and Izuku gasped. He jerked back, dropping everything in his hands. Turning around, he ran back into the store. "Midoriya!" Kirishima yelled after him before looking at Kai, who was watching him, gaze cold and calculating. It took him a second to mentally match the face to the pictures he had seen both when he was in Izuku's old apartment and also when he was shown pictures of him. Izuku had felt safer if he and Bakugo knew Kai's face, with and without the surgical masks he often wore, so they could keep him away. Kirishima backed up and put the bags back in the cart before walking back into the store as casually as he could without another word. Izuku was in the bathroom. He sat crouched on the toilet so no one could see his shoes and know he was there. He pulled his phone out and dialed the first number he thought of. "Hello." A groggy voice came on the line after a couple of rings. "Bakugo." "Oh hey nerd. Come get me. Please." The panic in his voice woke Bakugo up fully. "What's wrong? Is it Punchy?" At Izuku's confirming keen, Bakugo asked where he was. But Izuku didn't answer. Someone had walked into the bathroom and Izuku could barely breathe. He clutched the phone tightly, not making a sound. He hoped and prayed the stranger couldn't hear Bakugo yelling while he emptied his bladder. After not getting a response, Bakugo hung up. Izuku assumed it was to call Kirishima, but the feeling of being alone was overwhelming and he clamped his hands over his mouth to keep his rising panic silent. The stranger finished relieving himself, washed his hands, and left. Izuku felt pathetic as he tried to lower his heart rate. He had gotten so worked up over nothing. And to make matters worse, he realized he had left Kirishima alone with Kai. He just turned and ran. Something could have happened to him and it would be all Izuku's fault. Kai was going to kill Kirishima and then come for him. Almost like he knew Izuku was thinking about him, a text from Kirishima came through asking where he was. While it still felt like forever, it didn't take long before Bakugo and Kirishima burst into the bathroom. "Midoriya?" Kirishima called out. "Nerd!" Bakugo's voice echoed. Izuku opened the stall door. Kirishima and Bakugo stood side by side. The redhead's face was etched in concern. Bakugo's expression was that of irritation, but Izuku was already used to that being his resting face. The basketball shorts and old, ratty t-shirt still slightly rumpled from sleep said everything his face didn't. They both pulled Izuku into a group hug, not caring that they were in the middle of the bathroom. Once Izuku had collected himself, he heard Bakugo's voice in his ear. "Come on. We'll get Kiri another ride and I'll take you home." They waited with Kirishima until another zip car pulled up, this time an older lady in a minivan. They piled him and the groceries in. Before Bakugo even closed the van door, Kirishima was already in full conversation with her. He was just such a bright and happy person, it was impossible not to talk to him. After watching him drive away, Bakugo and Izuku walked to the blonde's Harley. "I beached him out already," Bakugo told him as they walked. "I don't know how Punchy ended up knowing exactly where you were, but I told Hair for Brains to make sure he actually matches the FING car with the picture on the app before getting in. He's worse than FING child. He doesn't even need candy to be lured away." It did match up though. It wasn't our original car but it got cancelled so we got that one. We didn't think anything of it. I've never seen that car before. All that matters is you guys are fine. "I'm sorry I woke you up," Izuku told him as he was handed Bakugo's helmet. "Don't be." Bakugo sat and started King Explosion Murder. Izuku clung to Bakugo as they headed home. He felt awful that not only did he drag him out of bed, but now that he had the only helmet, Bakugo had zero protection as they drove. In his rush to get to Izuku he had left his jacket, gloves, everything at home. He hadn't even taken the time to get dressed. But Bakugo didn't seem to hold it against him, if the times he rested his hand on Izuku's as they waited at lights were anything to go by. The rough hand was big enough to span across both of Izuku's forearms and the smaller man rested his helmeted head against the broad back in front of him. The revving of an engine behind them made them both look back. The car from earlier was behind them, Kai in the driver's seat with his gaze still as stone cold. "Bakugo! It's him!" Izuku yelled, though muffled by the helmet. He gave little punches to his back just hard enough that he could feel them without them hurting to relay the name Punchy. Bakugo's head whipped back to face him. He locked eyes with Kai for a split second. He saw the light was turning red for the opposite direction of traffic. He grabbed Izuku's arms and squeezed them tighter around his waist. Understanding, Izuku clung to him as tight as he could. Bakugo revved his bike a little. Both were scared. Izuku had zero control over the situation and knew he could die in an accident or die by Kai's hand. He had to help Bakugo out if they were going to get out of this. There was no time to panic. He could do that when he got home or when Kai was standing over him to kill him. He had to focus on Bakugo. If he focused on helping him and protecting him the only way he knew how, their teamwork might pull off. All Bakugo knew was if he couldn't shake Kai, that BSTRD would run them off the road. Izuku had a chance with a helmet, but with no leathers on, it would mean he would lose skin for sure. Bakugo would just be dead. There's no way he would survive. He didn't regret giving up his helmet. As soon as the light turned green, Bakugo shot forward. Kai had a slower start, but he made up for it quickly. Izuku was being his second set of eyes, tapping his sides based on which side he saw Kai coming up to. Bakugo drove in between lanes of traffic, and for a while he lost him. But as they turned down a quieter road that led to the apartment building, Kai appeared from a side street and almost crashed into them. The bike skidded low, almost completely horizontal, and Bakugo had never been so grateful that he and Kirishima had been young and stupid and had done this very same stunt many times before. He brought the bike upright and glanced at Izuku. The helmet rendered him expressionless, but his limbs were shaking, though they didn't loosen. Kai was on them again. Bakugo didn't have time to regain the speed after they nearly crashed, and the bike lurched forward as Kai bumped them with his car. Bakugo felt Izuku lose his grip and grabbed him so hard it would leave a bruise. He didn't care. He couldn't let him fall. He felt arms tighten around his waist again just in time for another bump to the back end of the bike. Revving the engine, Bakugo lurched forward. He heard Kai squeal the tires as he sped up. He had only a few precious seconds before they would be caught again, and he knew this was their last chance. He held the bike steady with one hand and used the other to lift Izuku's leg up so it was around his waist. He did the same with the other leg so Izuku was clinging to him like a baby monkey. Izuku clung tight, having no idea what was happening. Bakugo shifted slightly and brought the bike up into a wheelie. He never prayed in his life, but he prayed then that Izuku could hold on and not make him lose his balance. He pulled it back further and further, almost to the point of no return. And the road lit up. The metal of his pipes scraped against the pavement, causing sparks to shoot up all around them. Kai slammed on the brakes as some crackled onto his windshield. Bakugo brought the bike down and after a slight bounce tore down the street, turning corners and getting out of Kai's sight before he could recover. It took them a little longer, but they made it home. Bakugo only slowed as he drove into the underground parking lot and to his designated spot. As he shut off the bike, he slumped over it as he started to crash after his adrenaline rush. He felt Izuku's limbs untangle from his waist and with legs shaking, he climbed off the bike. He took the helmet off of the smaller man, who sat there unblinking in shock. "Hey!" Bakugo's voice rasped, getting his attention. Stunned green eyes met with exhausted red ones and Bakugo brought their foreheads together as they processed everything they went through. Neither knew how long they stayed like that until Bakugo finally pulled away and helped Izuku off the bike. Arms around each other's waist, they made their way to the elevator. No words were exchanged. Neither man considered leaning on each other as they might be considered weak. Their adrenaline had crashed and they were the only thing keeping the other upright. Somehow they made it to their floor and Bakugo held the door open for Izuku. Kirishima had just finished putting the groceries away and came over to meet them before stopping short. He looked at the blank expression on both of their faces, the spark burns covering Bakugo's legs, and the way they held onto each other as if they were going to fall over. "What the hell happened?" he yelled. "We almost died." Bakugo's voice was quiet and hoarse. "I need to sleep." He let go of Izuku, who dropped bonelessly to the floor. Kirishima helped Bakugo to bed, promising to be right back. Bakugo dropped onto the bed and fell asleep almost immediately. His best friend pulled off his shoes and pulled the blankets up around him. Bewildered by everything, Kirishima hurried back to Izuku, who hadn't moved from the floor. He picked up the freckled boy and put him on the couch, also wrapping him up in blankets. Once his shock wore off a bit, Izuku told him everything about the chase and the stunts Bakugo did that he was in no way prepared for, how they almost died and how those brave, reckless antics saved their lives. Kirishima sat beside him and hugged him until Izuku too fell asleep and he was left wondering how one grocery shopping trip could turn into such a disaster. Despite having just grocery shopped, No one ate dinner that night. No one was hungry. As Bakugo slept on in his room, Kirishima felt he owed Izuku an apology when he woke up. An apology? You didn't do anything wrong. I do owe you one in a way. Kirishima looked down at his hands. Look, this whole thing is my fault. None of this would have happened if I wasn't a coward. I can't do it. Do what? Izuku was confused, but he touched his hand as whatever Kiri had to say, he seemed to be struggling with. Drive. I mean, I can drive, but I can't get behind the wheel. I don't think I'm following. Kirishima nodded and took a breath. So I got my G1 in high school. Baku got his M1 at the same time. We got our G2 and M2 together. Then finally we got our G and M. Bakugo was determined to buy his own bike. He was living with us, but he tried to keep himself separated in a way. They weren't his parents, so they shouldn't waste money on presents kind of thing. Clothes and stuff was fine, but nothing expensive. So one night, couple days after graduation, Bakugo and I were hanging out and my mom called. She said her and my dad were coming to get us because she had a surprise for me. So we're waiting and they don't show up. Little bit later we get a call from the cops saying there was an accident. We get to the hospital but they're already gone. We found out later that they had bought a car. Just a used one someone was selling. My name was on the paper. They got me my first car and they were so excited. I could hear it in her voice, but at the time I didn't know why. I can still picture how it would have went down, them pulling up and my mom would have jumped around and hugged me, and my dad would have slapped me on the back and handed me the keys. I would have driven them home or to their car or wherever they wanted. But a truck couldn't or wouldn't stop and smoke them. Kirishima went quiet for a while as he relived the worst time in his life. After a couple minutes he spoke again. My parents died because of me. They got me a car and that's the only reason they were even out. They would have been home safe if not for me. I haven't sat behind the wheel of a car since. I just can't. But because I don't drive anymore, it almost got you and Bakugo killed today. And I'm so sorry. Izuku stared at him. How did you even put all that together to make it out to be your fault? Kiri, if I'm not to blame for this, neither are you. My mom told me that Kai's failures as a human being are on him. Not me. So they definitely aren't on you. I don't want you to blame yourself for something none of us could control. Kirishima gave him a sad smile, trying to take Izuku's words to heart. Izuku shifted over and wrapped his arms around Kirishima. The redhead leaned his head against the others. I guess I can take credit for saving you guys, he joked after a minute, trying to lighten the mood as he always did. You can. Sure. The stunts Baku did were ones we did when we were younger. Man, we did everything. I had no idea what he was going to do even when he started doing them. I was so scared. Izuku's hand was over his heart just remembering it. He dropped me a lot at first. I'm some sort of freak, I guess, 'cause I've never broken any bones. It's like I'm a rock or something. We did wheelies together all the time. He loved going so fast around corners that the bike would almost be flat on its side. He did that. I almost fell off. I used to hold on with one hand and use a piece of chalk to see if I could draw a line. That was his old bike though. He was more reckless with that one. A friend of ours, Ciro, had a dirt bike and I was riding beach on Baku's bike and Ciro came up behind us. While going down the road, I climbed from the back of Baku's to the front of Ciro's. As soon as I had left Baku I fell. I swear the pavement cracked under me. Izuku laughed in disbelief. And you didn't break anything? Shaking his head, Kirishima laughed too. Nothing. Barely even any road burn. We weren't going that fast, but man, Blasty was said. I don't remember how much money he spent, but he bought all the packing tape he taped Ciro's arms to a chair in his garage. I will never forget this. He laughed more. Baku went and wrapped the dirt bike in layers and layers of tape. He hung the bike from the ceiling of the garage using only packing tape. And made Ciro watch the entire time. It took that kid forever to get it down. Baku called him Tape Arms after that. Izuku laughed along with Kirishima. He didn't know who Ciro was, but he could picture everything so perfectly, right down to that smug smile he saw on Bakugo every once in a while. Baku and I had this other trick we did where I sat in front of him on the bike pretty much on the handlebar area and he'd stand up, still steering. I'd lay on my back under him and he'd pull us up into a wheelie. If you want a crazy trust exercise, that's the way to go. Your back is against the seat and you're just hanging upside down with your legs over the front of the bike. You can't see anything and you know he doesn't have full control because he's in a wheelie. You just hold on to his butt and hope for the best. That's insane. Izuku couldn't help but yelp. Kirishima grinned. It was. But stupid shit like that had him ready for today, he pointed out. The hell are you guys going on about? A sleep-roughened voice asked from the doorway. They looked over and there stood Bakugo rubbing his eyes. You woke me up. I'm telling Midoriya about the stupid shit we did with your old bike. Like laying on your seat while you did a wheelie. Bakugo chuckled as he plopped on the couch beside them. Midoriya held on better than you did the first time. He didn't fall off. Took you like a year to hang upside down like that. I bet he could do it in a month. A month? Izuku stammered. I'm not comfortable enough for that. I don't mean you, he amended quickly. We did some scary stuff today and you kept me safe. I trust you. I just don't trust myself on it. Especially not enough to hang down like that. And well, I'm not really comfortable with wearing your helmet because it means you're not wearing one. Kirishima pointed at Izuku. Thank you, Midoriya. He pointed his finger at Bakugo next. You cocky son of a bitch. I don't want to see any more of the whole no helmet thing. And if you ever get on that bike dressed the way you did today, I'm kicking your butt so hard you won't haven't but left. I wouldn't have even been able to recognize your body to claim it if you crashed. Bakugo. That's my fault, Izuku said quietly as he looked down at his hands. Not really. Yes, you knew he only has one helmet, but he knows how to dress to ride. He let his emotions override common sense as he always does. Kirishima wasn't letting either one off the hook so easily. There would have been two if you had FING replaced yours after it got stolen, you FING fuckmunch, Bakugo snapped. You bought a new bike and changed the seats so no one could ride with you. But you're right, I should have known to buy another one. Anyway, that wasn't because of you. I figured you'd ride like Midoriya does. Izuku cut in before they could continue yelling. So Bakugo got a new bike with only one seat and you didn't get a new helmet because you thought Bakugo was trying to keep you off the bike, but it was actually someone else? Yeah, thanks. He always wanted to ride, but we fought too much and he would have distracted me and I know we would have crashed. He wasn't worth it, Bakugo growled. Okay, and you never told Kirishima he could still ride, and you never asked Bakugo if you could still ride. Izuku spoke slowly so they both heard what he was saying. They sheepishly admitted he was right, or rather Kirishima did and Bakugo just said, "Tisi." But Izuku still felt proud of himself or helping end their argument. 4 days following the zip incident, Izuku was exceptionally clingy. He never wanted to be alone, and if Bakugo and Kirishima were on opposite ends of the couch, he'd wedge himself between them instead of sitting in the armchair. It turned out Kai didn't allow Izuku to watch a lot of movies, so the three of them piled onto the couch to show Izuku ones he hadn't seen. They had been doing it for weeks, trying to squeeze in at least a movie a night on Bakugo's days off. Kirishima was never in the movie mood, if it was just he and Izuku. It worked out better this way, Kirishima thought. Especially when Izuku was in a clingy mood like he was now. The zip car incident was rough enough on them that even Bakugo called in sick, giving him extra days off. Kiri was developing a terrible habit of not peeing before the movie started and always had to get up to go part way through. Or he would just get up and subtly bring his phone with him to play a quick game or two while just sitting on the edge of the tub. When he would return from the bathroom, Bakugo would still be in the corner seat but Izuku would have ended up shifted closer to him so he was curled up right beside him, particularly if there were any parts that made Izuku startle, despite the fact they hadn't watched any horror flicks. Bakugo's arm was over the back of the couch and every time Izuku jumped, he would rub his thumb against his arm so subtly it took Kirishima a few movies to notice it at first. It made him smile to himself. When they were younger, they had Sunday night movies. Kirishima's mom and dad would sit on the couch and he and Bakugo took the floor. The sounds of yelling and things slamming caused the same reaction in Bakugo for years and Kirishima's mom always reached down to rub his blonde hair comfortingly. Which seemed to be exactly what Bakugo was doing to Izuku, though it did seem a little more NTMT. It was so clear to Kirishima how much they liked each other, and this slow dance they were doing was killing him. They were practically in each other's arms now. Just take the leap. It had been over 2 years since Bakugo's last real relationship ended, and Kirishima was so happy the day Bakugo threw him out. They were like oil and water. They brought out the worst in each other. Their fights had been loud, the SSC was louder, and they only ever did one or the other. Looking at the way he was sitting with Izuku, he never would have imagined this Bakugo and the other one were the same person. As the credits rolled, Kirishima let out a loud yawn and stretched. Well, I'm going to call it a night. You kids don't stay up too late. You might be off Baku bro, but we've got class tomorrow. He saw Bakugo and Izuku both look at the time, and their eyes widened as they realized it was so late. Kirishima headed into his room, but neither Izuku nor Bakugo moved. You should take the bed tonight, Izuku said after a minute, still sitting against him. Nah, I'm not tired, Bakugo shrugged. Are you sure? Izuku clearly didn't believe him. You look exhausted. Futu of face. That wasn't very nice. Izuku pouted up at him, and Bakugo quickly looked away. I'm just being caring. Fine. Futu nerd. Izuku laughed. When he felt Bakugo's hand that was still on the back of the couch rest against his arm, he took a moment to stretch and yawn, leaning against Bakugo a little more as it ended. Purely coincidental, of course. I really should get some sleep. Izuku's head was almost against Bakugo's shoulder. Then go to bed, Bakugo's voice was soft. Izuku pouted again. But I'm comfy. Then stay. Bakugo brushed his thumb lightly over Izuku's arm, and they sat in comfortable silence for a little while. Eventually Izuku couldn't hold back his yawning and got to his feet, grumbling a little. Bakugo couldn't help the half-smile as he listened to him. Heading towards the bathroom, he smiled back at the blonde even though there was very little light to actually see it. Good night, Bakugo. Dream of me, nerd. Bakugo's voice was smug. Izuku blushed bright red and hurriedly closed the bathroom door behind him. After being kept so isolated, Izuku was loving having people around. It was like he was making up for lost time. Kirishima shared all but one class with Izuku, and even after that one class, which was now filling with friends as Izuku was finding himself again, he would show back up at the college and they'd head home together. Unless, of course, Kirishima had a dentist appointment. Class had finished early and the prof had given them the chance to work on their group projects or talk amongst themselves. Izuku had corralled his group together and had made the most of their time. They were just packing up their things when their classmate, Pony, piped up. There's a really scary-looking dude outside, she said as she glanced out the door window. Izuku's blood froze, having gotten a text from Kai that morning that he was learning not to hesitate to delete. Surely there were enough people around that Kai wouldn't make a scene. Or maybe that was the point. Be around a lot of people so Izuku couldn't say no or freak out. He took a deep, steadying breath. He had no choice but to face him. There was no other way out of the room. As he dragged his feet to the door, he couldn't help but wish he had had more time with Bakugo and Kirishima. He had really enjoyed their friendship. And then there was his mom. He had been looking forward to visiting her. He took a moment to type out a message to her. Hey Mom. Just wanted to say I love you, smiley face. He hit send. He wouldn't let her know he was scared. He wouldn't let her worry. If these were going to be his last words to her, he wanted them to be happy so she would remember him that way. Mustering all the courage he could and swallowing hard, Izuku walked to the door to leave with the rest of his classmates when he caught sight of wild blonde hair and a scowl that could scare away a bear. Izuku's legs suddenly felt like jelly with relief. Bakugo! What are you doing here? He called out as he made his way over. Numbnuts said you'd be heading home alone. Izuku wasn't sure if Kirishima told Bakugo to meet him at his class or if he did it all on his own, but he was grateful. He had been so afraid it was Kai, so this was definitely better. As much as he liked Kirishima's company, he definitely preferred Bakugo waiting for him if he was honest. He wrapped his arms around his waist and gave a tiny squeeze, trying to avoid the box that was tucked under the blonde's arm. Bakugo tensed for a split second, not having expected it before putting his arm around him, his helmet bouncing a little off of Izuku's butt. Hey Bakugo, a female voice spoke from behind Izuku before he could ask about the box. Neither one broke the hug. So Izuku stayed tucked snugly under Bakugo's arm as they turned their attention to Mina. "Hey, Pinky. It's been a while. It's good to see you again." Bakugo nodded to her. "Not that I miss you or anything, but Midoriya doesn't make fun of Kiri nearly enough." Mina laughed a little before checking her phone. "I gotta run so I can't stay and chat, but we should catch up sometime. Are you still at the Vibe?" When he nodded again, she grinned. "Maybe I'll see you there. You two make a really cute couple, by the way." She nodded at the way the two were still holding each other before heading off. She didn't see Bakugo and Izuku JRK away from each other, both bright red. They walked toward an exit as Izuku tried to lighten the mood by saying, "At least out of all the guys that could have been mistaken as my boyfriend, I got a cute one." Bakugo coughed a little but otherwise didn't reply. Though the more they walked, the closer Bakugo shifted until their shoulders bumped and hands touched as they walked. As they walked through the parking lot, Izuku turned to look at Bakugo. "Thank you for coming to get me today." "TC, don't mention it. Figured you were tired of looking at Kiri's dumb face." "Maybe a little," Izuku joked, but he couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. "So what's in the box?" "Oh, here." He handed the box to Izuku before rubbing his free hand over the back of his neck. Izuku watched him, confused. Why was he so embarrassed? And why was he getting a gift? "It's not my birthday." "It's not a birthday gift. It just, well, you'll see. If you don't like it, I can take it back." Bakugo wouldn't look at him, but if he did, he would have seen Izuku move the box as far away from Bakugo as he could. This was the first thing Bakugo had given him. There's no way he was taking it back. "Can I open it now?" Bakugo nodded. It was just a brown cardboard box that wasn't even taped up. Izuku unfolded the flaps and was met with styrofoam peanuts. He walked over to the garbage can near the ticketing booth in the parking lot and carefully dumped them out. Bakugo stayed where he was. Izuku's eyes widened as he saw the top of his gift. He looked at Bakugo before pulling it out. It was a motorcycle helmet that wasn't just any helmet though. It was fully covering like Bakugo's, but bright blue, and all along the chin were red and white stripes in a way that happened to match the chest of All Might's suit. The thing that he had noticed first though, were the yellow pieces of fiberglass that were designed to be like the iconic pieces of All Might's hair, though they didn't go up as high. Izuku left the box and remaining peanuts in the trash and ran back to Bakugo with it in hand. Tears were in his eyes as he looked into warm crimson ones. "Is this really for me?" Bakugo nodded. "It's from the same company that made mine. It's all Kevlar enforced, so it's quality sheet. Just thought you'd appreciate that design a little more. I can take it back if you don't like it." "Don't you dare. I love it, Bakugo. I love it so much." "Thank you." Bakugo nudged him with his shoulder as they started waking to the Harley. "Don't mention it. It's not a big deal. You need one to ride with me. And after the other day, we can't really share anymore." Izuku took a deep breath in and let it out. He leaned over, placing a soft kiss on Bakugo's cheek. The blonde's face went blank and he stopped walking. Realizing Bakugo had stopped, Izuku turned and looked back at him. He was staring at nothing with his hand touching where Izuku's lips had grazed. "Bakugo!" Izuku called softly, not sure if he had taken things too far. Bakugo's gaze slowly focused on his face, an adorable expression of dazed confusion. The corner of his mouth on the side Izuku had kissed lifted into a small smile. The reverie was cut short by the sound of a revving engine. Bakugo looked towards the sound and saw an older car coming right for them. The same car that had gone after them before. Moving as fast as lightning, Bakugo was at Izuku, shoving him on top of a random car. He barely got out of the way himself when the car hit the one Izuku was on. A gloved hand reached out towards Izuku, but Bakugo put his arm out as a barrier between them. "I don't think so, you crazy son of effing beach." One hand grabbed Kai and the other grabbed the door handle, ripping it open. Bakugo pulled Kai out of the car and threw him to the ground. He was on top of him in a heartbeat, fists flying. Kai took punch after punch to the face, the sound of it echoing in the parking lot. Cartilage broke and Kai tried to cup his face in pain, but Bakugo wasn't having it. He yanked his arm out of the way and kept punching. But Kai wasn't about to go down without a fight. He tried to roll them so he had the advantage. He was used to pushing Izuku around, who was smaller and more SBMSSV. He wasn't prepared to handle someone who could more than take care of himself. He couldn't make Bakugo budge. Bakugo grabbed him by the hair. It was short and there wasn't much to grip, but that didn't matter. The blonde smashed Kai's head off the pavement. The crack was loud and there was a definite concussion. Kai was dazed and Bakugo stopped his assault getting to his feet. Kai tried to roll over to spit up the blood that was starting to fill the back of his throat. The blonde wasn't done, however. He started kicking any part of the scumbag that he could: face, ribs, limbs. The motorcycle boots he wore had solid soles and Kai cried out every time contact was made. His face was split and his blood covered the pavement along with Bakugo's boots. A kick shifted Kai's arm slightly and a sick grin spread across Bakugo's face. With a stomp at the right angle, he dislocated Kai's elbow. Kai started screaming despite blood spraying from his mouth. Fueled by rage, Bakugo grabbed his arm and twisted it over and over again, almost as though he were trying to rip it off. "Bakugo!" Izuku yelled to get his attention. As much as he had grown to hate Kai, he couldn't watch anymore. He felt sick. He wasn't afraid of Bakugo though. He felt protected. He placed a hand on the blonde's shoulder. "Let's just go home." Bakugo let go of Kai's arm hard, slamming it against the car door, causing another round of screaming. He grabbed his helmet that he didn't realize he'd dropped on his way to Izuku. He helped the green-haired man off the car and walked past Kai's car. He was in too much pain to follow them. All he could do was watch them walk off, fury building inside of him. He would make them both pay Bakugo for beating him, and Deku for ever thinking he could just walk away from him like he had. Bakugo looked back with his lip curled up in a snarl, and put his arm around Izuku's shoulders. Izuku thought he was being sweet and comforting, but Kai understood the message clearly: "Back off, he's mine." "Are you okay?" Even though it should have been Bakugo asking, it wasn't. Izuku's freckled face was etched in concern. "You're shaking." "Just adrenaline. I wanna pound that motherfucker's face in more." "I'm oddly calm," Izuku admitted. "I was terrified the second I saw him. But right now I'm functioning and I don't know how. Maybe you're starting to realize he's not going to lay a hand on you again. Because you're here?" Bakugo gave him a lopsided smile as he echoed their favorite hero's line. "Because I am here." When they got to the Harley, Bakugo looked back at Kai, who was still laying on the pavement. He would be there for a while yet. It didn't mean Bakugo wanted to linger around though. Even though he was shaking and it wasn't the best idea to be driving a bike like that, he and Izuku both put their helmets on. "How does it fit?" Izuku's head shot up at Bakugo's voice surrounding him. There was a soft chuckle. "There's an intercom set up so we talk while we ride. This is really cool. Wobble your head a little." Izuku did as he was told and Bakugo was confident he had gotten the right size. He climbed onto the bike and Izuku settled in behind him. With a last glance at Kai, he started up his bike. Izuku wrapped his arms around him and they headed home. They got back before Kirishima, and the redhead came in to find them playing All Might, Rise of the League of Villains. Kirishima went to grab a drink from the fridge and saw the two helmets. "Can't say I've seen an All Might helmet before," he called out. "Isn't it awesome? Bakugo got it for me." "Oh, did he? Hey Baku bro, can I see you for a minute?" Bakugo paused their game and headed to the kitchen. "What?" Keeping his voice hushed, Kirishima asked, "You just went and bought him a helmet?" When Bakugo said nothing, he pressed on. "Crimson Riot helmets go for just under 200 and no one really cares about him other than me. All Might, well, he's a big name." "He is." Bakugo's voice was terse. He didn't like where this was going. "How much?" When he was met with silence, he tried again. Though his voice was quiet, his tone was firm. "How much, Bakugo?" $469. $469? Kirishima hissed. "Please tell me you at least paid more for your own helmet." "3 something. But that was years ago. They're all more expensive now." "That's not the point, Bakugo. Do you remember what you told me when I wanted to buy Mina that necklace? You said not to waste money on something I didn't even know would work. That necklace was half the price of that helmet." "I was right though. Your relationship didn't last dash. You and Midoriya don't even have a relationship." Kirishima cut him off. That isn't why I got it for him. You wanted to get your girl a necklace. I wanted to get a friend a piece of safety equipment so when his psycho ex tries to kill him, which he tried to do again today by the way, his head won't shatter when we crash. Big difference. Bakugo wasn't keeping his voice down anymore and neither was Kirishima. If it's about friendship, where's my helmet? At the store where you can use your money to buy it. You bought his, Kirishima pointed out. He survives by you cashing a check from his mom because his ex has locked his funds. You at least have access to yours. I don't mean to interrupt, but I feel like you guys are talking about me, Izuku called from the living room, feeling awkward about all he was overhearing. Bakugo pushed himself away from the counter where he was leaning and went back to the couch. He picked up his controller. Kiri's being a fuckface. I'm trying to help. Well, don't. Please don't fight, guys, Izuku pleaded. Despite the incident with Kai today, it's been a good day. I'd like to keep it that way. Kirishima sighed and nodded. He wasn't really mad after all. He was just trying to point stuff out. He gave his friends a bright smile as he tried to squish onto the couch beside Izuku. Okay. We won't fight. Now shove your bum. Izuku smiled at Bakugo as he shifted closer. The blonde turned to look straight at the TV, but out of the corner of his eye, he could see the DMN shark-toothed smile that knew way too much. Izuku tried pushing himself away from Kirishima, but it was like he was made of rock. His wrists were trapped in more rock, scraping them raw as he tried to get away. Kiri, get him out of here. Bakugo spit out blood from where he lay on the ground. His legs shattered by the tire iron in Kai's hand. No! Izuku screamed as he struggled harder against his friend's hold. He needed to intervene. He needed to save Bakugo. Leave him alone. Please. Bakugo cried out and coughed as the iron hit his face. His face was swollen, split in more places than could easily be counted, and there was blood everywhere. His left arm was broken, bones protruding. Kai, I'll do anything you want, just please him go. Kiri, go. Bakugo wheezed. It's far too late to let him go, darling Deku. Kai's face elongated, shredding his mask, and seemed to snap at a bunch of angles, and the alley got darker as he got bigger and bigger. A whistle seemed to fill the air to a familiar tune, though there seemed to be gurgling blood warping it and making it even more macabre. Stay back, nerd. Bakugo coughed up more blood. Kirishima pulled Izuku away, despite the smaller man fighting and screaming. Kai lifted the pipe and did a test swings before bringing the pipe down towards Bakugo's face again. Kai missed this time, instead impaling the pipe in Bakugo's skull. The fire in those red eyes went out as Kai yanked the pipe free and continued to beat his lifeless body. Bakugo! Midoriya! Izuku's eyes flew open. Arms were around him before he could even catch his breath. It's just me. I got you, Bakugo's voice rumbled in his ear. The bedroom door burst open and Kirishima ran in ready to fight. He skidded to a stop at the sight before him. Izuku sat huddled on the bed, tears streaming down his face. Bakugo sat on the edge of the bed, arms around him and cradling Izuku's head to him. He was murmuring quietly and Kirishima couldn't make out what he was saying. The two nodded to each other and Kirishima slowly backed out of the room and closed the door, leaving it to Bakugo to handle. Bakugo continued to hold Izuku tight, even as he turned to bury his face in Bakugo's chest as he clung tightly to him. I'm here. The hell'd you dream about? In between sobs, Izuku told him how he dreamt they'd been out for a walk and were chased into an alley where Kai beat Bakugo to death as he tried to protect Izuku. I saw you die, Izuku hiccuped. I couldn't get to you. I tried. He broke into tears again. I can tell you for certain that won't happen, Bakugo was so sure of himself. How do you know? Izuku wiped at his eyes. Just because you beat him up, doesn't mean he won't come back. If anything, he's going to be angrier. Bakugo lifted Izuku's chin to look him in the eyes. I know because it took him multiple hits to take me down in your dream. Since I learned to fight, if you can't take me down with the first hit, there's no hope for you. I got this, Midoriya. And I got you. What if he has a tire iron? Wouldn't be my first fight with something like that. Bakugo didn't mention that in said fight, as soon as a pipe was brought into play, Kirishima was at his side and they disarmed him together. But they had been young then. Now Bakugo was bigger, stronger, and much more experienced in fights. He wasn't concerned about a hypothetical fight. He shifted so he was against the wall, not letting go of Izuku. They sat in silence for a while as Izuku got himself under control, soothed by the sound of Bakugo's heartbeat. The blonde ran his thumb in small circles on the other man's shoulder, resting his cheek on the nest of wild green curls. Bakugo wasn't even upset he had been woken up. With how badly he'd been beaten, there was no way Kai could do anything, so for the first time in weeks, he fell asleep during the night. Only to be woken up by Izuku screaming. But all was quiet now. In the early hours of the morning, everything was soft, even Bakugo. He was lulled to sleep by the little puffs of air against his chest that signaled Izuku had fallen back to sleep. He woke up a couple hours later in the same position, leaning against the wall with his arms around a sleeping Izuku. His heart hurt a little at how good this felt. He figured Izuku wouldn't want to be with anyone for a long time. He did give him a kiss the other day though. That had to mean the attraction was mutual and that Izuku had been considering them as a couple. He had been thinking about it for a while. Hell, it's what he thought about the most. But he was afraid. He was afraid of rushing Izuku. The pieces of the puzzle he had about Kai were ugly. While he knew he would never treat Izuku that way, Bakugo swore he would do everything in his power to never put him in a position where he felt he had to agree to something. Including agreeing to a date. But Bakugo was also afraid of himself. His previous and only lengthy relationship had been a disaster that only ended when Kirishima got hit. He knew he had been an awful boyfriend and he got out of the relationship what he had put into it. Everything about what he had forming with Izuku was opposite of how he had been back then. But there were still so many what-ifs that bounced around his head. The first time Izuku had joined them for breakfast, Bakugo was drawn to him. His body had been bruised but Bakugo knew he wasn't broken. He had just strayed from himself. Having been down that path himself, he wanted to be part of that journey with him. He wanted to see the Izuku Midoriya that made it out on the other side. And he had meant that solely as a friend. Somewhere along the way, those big green eyes had gotten to him. The longer Izuku spent with them, the brighter and more livelier they got. They were hard to look at sometimes. More than once he zoned out in the middle of the conversation just staring into those eyes. Bakugo was positive they were going to be the death of him. The way the pair had the morning to themselves was the worst. Conversation had been strained at first because they had been strangers, and then it flowed so easily. He knew he had fallen for Izuku, but it seemed like Izuku was liking him back. Even before the kiss had happened. It was hard to keep to himself when he would lean against the counter while Bakugo cooked, mug of steaming tea in his hands, sleeves of his button-down shirt rolled up his forearms. If it wasn't his eyes, it would be those DMN sleeves that killed Bakugo. He scoffed when Mina and Kiri had been heading for a date and Mina asked him to roll his sleeves up. Bakugo had asked her about it later, and she said there was something about it that was so secretary. She had emphasized the word. He had laughed then, but he understood now, even though he couldn't word the appeal any better than she did. He wanted those arms around him all the time, not just on the bike. He had never wanted to bend someone or be bent over by someone over his bike before, but he did when he was with Izuku. Thankfully, Izuku's hands had never dropped to his lap. He hadn't lied to Kirishima when he said the helmet wasn't a relationship gift. He truly wanted to keep Izuku safe. If he could up it by giving him something that made that smile light up his face, that was a bonus. But as Bakugo shifted him carefully so that he could get up and leave the room to start breakfast, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect Izuku with his life, even if it meant getting beaten to death with a tire iron like in that nightmare of his. Sometimes days just don't go right, and today was one of those days for Bakugo. He didn't have enough milk for the breakfast he'd wanted to make, but was too late into cooking to run to the store. Fire alarm testing was that day while he was trying to sleep. He had forgotten his towel in his room when he showered, so Kirishima and Midoriya got an eyeful because in his anger he didn't think to ask one of them to grab it for him. He dropped part of his dinner, and his boss told him when he got to work that he would have to testify against Mineta the date RPST in court. The angry cloud hanging over his scowling face worked at keeping customers away at least. They'd get their drinks and leave him alone. All but one customer anyway. Cotton candy cocktail. Bakugo looked up into the dark-rimmed eyes of Kirishima's ex. Hey Pinky. You look moodier than usual. Bakugo missed Mina Ishido. She was beautiful, free-spirited, and just a fun person to be around. It was easy to see how Kirishima had gone for her. Plus she was frank, a quality Bakugo appreciated. She had practically lived with them from day one, so when they split, it had been weird adjusting to her not being around. Today's been a shit show. Work or home? Both. Let's go around back on your break. Bakugo nodded and went about his job serving others. It was some time later before he pulled her through the employees-only section to the alley out back. He had brought a hand towel with him and set it on the steps so she wouldn't ruin her dress. If only you weren't gay, she grinned. So what's eating you? And so Bakugo ranted about his sheet day, not minding when she'd pause him to elaborate. Well, he did mind the shower bit. What are you so uptight about? You and I have seen each other naked before. Hell, even you and I have seen each other's goods. And your boyfriend is supposed to see you naked. That's how that works. Midoriya and I aren't dating. You aren't? But I saw it out wait so when I said. Oh man. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't ruin anything. Mina chewed on her lip. You didn't. It feels like it's heading that way, you know? Just really slowly. Midoriya is a great guy. Really determined, hardworking. He's become bubbly and really friendly. I guess it just took him a while to warm up to everyone. He's easily everyone's favorite person. I know the feeling. Bakugo found his shoes fascinating as he admitted that. How does someone so grumpy surround himself with people that are like little sons? Midoriya, me. Mina winked as she added herself to the list. So it's still huh? It's hard to think of him as anything else. He's dating again, but I don't think it's working out so far. He had a date with someone but they didn't go out again. Mina nudged a rock with her shoe. I miss him and his stupid face. But we were only dating a couple months and he was already ready to tie the knot. He jumps in with both feet and while I love that about him, I just can't do that kind of thing. I'm glad he's out there again though. I hope he finds someone who can give him what I couldn't. She looked up as Bakugo nudged her with his knee. I'm fine, Bakugo. It's why I'm here. Trying to find love myself. Any luck? Well, I look smoking hot and I'm alone in an alley with an attractive man who is as gay as they come. So you tell me? She laughed and winked at him. Well, you're at a gay bar, he pointed out. She poked her tongue out at him. I know where I am. She went to speak again but Bakugo got distracted as his phone buzzed. Hope your night got better. I'll see you in the morning, smiley face. Bakugo bit down a ghost of smile a fraction. Too late. Mina immediately grabbed his phone. Nerd? Really? Your prospective boyfriend is in your phone as nerd? Why am I not surprised? But look at that. You have a breakfast date. Not a date if he lives with us. Bakugo couldn't help but grumble, give me my phone back. Mina kept moving out of the way when he tried to grab it. Her fingers moved like rapid fire before finally handing it back. That's what's getting me through my shift. Smiley face. See you then? You actually sent that. I never use smiley faces. His face was bright red. His phone dinged and he closed his eyes for a second before looking. Laughing face, good night Bakugo, smiley face. That's a lot of smiley faces, Mina staged whispered over his shoulder. If you don't use them now, maybe you should start with him. Bakugo shut the screen off and glared at her. Break's over. Go away. He got to his feet and led her back through to the bar itself. Mina didn't say anything, but she noticed the furrowed rage lines between his eyebrows had smoothed. That message from Izuku seemed to be just what he needed. But those texts from Izuku only went so far. Bakugo's shift had improved, even after Mina left. His night came crashing down when he was about to head home. He headed out to where he had parked King Explosion Murder and froze. The pipes from his muffler were on the ground, and pieces on the bike itself were dented, a handlebar, front and rear fenders. The headlight was smashed, the seat was slashed open, and both tires were flat. Spray-painted graffiti covered the bike, in particular the fuel tank which had the largest surface area. The scream of rage echoed in the night. He walked a couple feet over to the dumpster and started kicking it with everything he had in him. Stupid dumb sheet goddamn mother f fuckhead sheet stain b. Bakugo yelled as he kicked over and over. With shaking hands, Bakugo called to get his bike towed. He surveyed the damage as he waited, but there wasn't much more he could find with only the parking lot light to go by. He ran his hand through his hair furiously. If the frame was damaged in any way, that would be the end of the king. As it was, it would be an expensive fix. All that money down the drain. Bakugo had spent the last 2 years customizing his bike. Not all of it was expensive and some things he kept as stock, but when he splurged, he splurged. His seat was $300, and he had a $170 skull fuel gauge, which was now desecrated. After what seemed like forever, the tow truck arrived. The driver hooked up the bike and Bakugo hopped in the passenger's seat. "Who did you PSS off?" the driver asked. He had seen that type of thing enough to know it wasn't just regular vandalism. Boyfriend's ex. It was easier to sum it up that way, plus the details of the situation wasn't for outsiders, not that the driver actually cared anyway. Figured as much. "Where are we off to?" "Real Steel Auto Body." Sensing Bakugo wasn't in the mood to talk, the driver said nothing more until he got to the requested shop. He unhooked the bike, got paid, and left Bakugo alone in the lot. He walked home to burn off steam. For the first time since moving in, Izuku woke up first. There was a smile on his face that could only be credited to the text he had gotten in reply from Bakugo. He came around the hallway to grab clothes from his stash in the living room when he saw Bakugo sleeping on the couch. He was on his stomach, almost in the fetal position, blankets half off him and one foot sticking out. Izuku smiled at him and hurried to get dressed. He wanted to take full advantage of the rare moment. "Bakugo," Izuku's voice was soft, matching the gentle way he shook the sleeping man's shoulder. A scarlet eye cracked open slightly then widened as he saw how close Izuku was to him. "Nerd." His voice had a deeper rasp from sleep. "What time is it?" "Almost 8. Sheet sorry." He sat up and ran his hands over his face. "I'll get breakfast started. Don't worry about it. I just finished. When I came out and you were still sleeping, I thought I'd give you a break." Izuku offered him a bright smile. "It's on the table. I'm going to go wake up Kirishima." Bakugo got up and stretched before making his way to the table. He grabbed Izuku's tea and stole a sip just as the green-haired man knocked on Kirishima's door. "Wake up you Bisardi." Bakugo choked, hitting his chest as he coughed. "The F was that? I thought I'd wake him up Bakugo style since I made breakfast." Izuku's smile lit up the room. "Well, it was weak," Bakugo scoffed. "There's rage burning deep inside of you, even if you don't realize it. Find it. Release all at Kiri. And don't use your knuckles. Use the side of your fist." Izuku nodded very seriously. With more anger to his voice, he tried again. "Wake up you Bisardi." He raised his fist to bang on the door but it opened and he ended up hitting Kirishima in the face. "Oh my god. You weren't supposed to open the door. Are you okay?" "Oh my god." Izuku freaked out. A rare sound came from the dining table. Bakugo was laughing. Not the chuckles he let out once in a while. This was a true belly-bursting, hearty laugh. When they made their way over, after much reassurance from an amused Kirishima that he was okay, Bakugo was gasping for air, tears streaming down his face. Seeing Bakugo laughing so much passed to the other two. Izuku joined in once he was sure all was okay. Once they finally quieted down, Kirishima looked at the food in front of him. This didn't look like Bakugo's cooking. "What is this?" "Eggs in hell," Izuku told them. "Poached eggs in tomato sauce with spicy sausage." "Bakugo, I added hot sauce to yours. I don't know if it's the right amount, but it was burning my nose to sniff it." Bakugo took a tentative bite of egg and sauce. The burning sensation filled his mouth and he swore he must have had hearts in his eyes. It burned so good. He was in love. And then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He swallowed and got up for his phone. He took a deep breath before answering the dreaded call. "Hey Tetsu." "Yeah, that's the king." "I know. Came out of work to that." "Fucking right I was said." "I know. Can you fix him?" "Yeah man, I get that. I know it's bad." "Yeah. Sure thing. Mind if I swing by in a bit and go over him with you? See what my options are. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, man. See you in a bit. When he hung up, he turned back to finish eating and saw his roommates staring at him. Did something happen to the king? Kirishima asked. Are you okay? Izuku asked, worried. Bakugo took his seat and stabbed a piece of sausage with his fork. Your ex trashed my bike. Horror was etched on Izuku's face. Oh God. Bakugo, I'm so sorry. I never wanted him to go after you. I know. Kinda figured it'd be a given after I fed him up, not to mention keeping you away from him. But my effing bike. I'm not worth the trouble he keeps giving you. Shut your DMN mouth. You are worth it, Kirishima added. When do you go see what the damage is? Around lunch. He's got some stuff to finish up first. Do you mind if I go? Kirishima asked. Me too. Izuku added. It's because of me, so I want to see it. Fine. Whatever. Kirishima and Izuku met Bakugo in front of Real Steel Auto Body Shop in between their classes. They were barely in the waiting area a minute before a tall, well-built man came in to meet them. Bakugo! He reached a hand out and clasped the blonde's before pulling him in for a manly. Hey Tetsu. I'm Kirishima. The redhead pushed forward and extended his hand, eyeing him up. Tetsu, at your service. Kiri's hand was taken in a grip so strong it put a vice grip to shame. He matched strength and they grinned at each other. And I'm Midoriya. Once Kirishima let go of his hand, Izuku shook it. Tetsu motioned for them to follow him. The trio went into the garage section where King Explosion Murder sat in the corner. Izuku and Bakugo both gasped. Izuku felt tears prick his eyes at the state of the bike. Bakugo had other concerns. Who the F are you? Bakugo yelled as a ponytailed girl had the audacity to slide her hand along the fuel tank. That's Kendo. She works in the shop with me, Tetsu told them. Kendo looked up. You're Bakugo, right? I've heard a lot about the king. It's a beautiful bike. Well, looking past the damage. I know, but only Tetsu works on him. There was no arguing with that tone. He told me that when I asked if I could do it, she grinned at him. Izuku moved forward and ran his hand over some of the damage. His finger traced the word Deku that was part of Deku is mine sprayed on the side. I'm so sorry, Bakugo. I wish he would just leave us all alone. His voice caught as he spoke. Are you Deku? Kendo asked him. Izuku nodded. Unique name. It was a nickname. What does it mean? Kirishima asked quietly. Defenseless Izuku. The garage went quiet, not having expected that as an. Midoriya forced a smile on his face as he looked over at Tetsu. Can the king be fixed? I don't know what happened, but either this guy doesn't know bikes, he's weak and unmanly and couldn't actually dent it, or you've got horseshoes buried in your butt, Bakugo. From everything I've seen, it's all cosmetic. The frame isn't damaged. My assessment right now is that I can fix this. Bakugo's face lit up in hope and happiness for a split second before his stoic mask settled back in place. Of course you can. There's a reason I only go to you. Tetsu laughed a little. I'm going to start ordering parts. Stock or what's on there now? Bakugo ran his hand lovingly up the U-bar and along a handlebar itself. If it's basic parts, go stock. Otherwise, what I've got unless it's over 100. Call me for anything over that. Keep my mini apes but stock seat, fuel gauge, and anything I can mod myself. His current ones were nice, but they weren't necessary in the moment. It was going to be a pricey fix as is. But his mini apes were important. He could change them himself, but he would have to drive it out of the shop and he couldn't stand having his handlebars low to the bike. He also didn't want them raised so much he felt like a child trying to reach them. Mini ape handlebars were perfection. Tetsu nodded as he spoke, keeping a mental checklist of what he wanted. If I find damage to the frame, I'm scraping the king. I'll save the custom parts for your next bike. If it comes to that. Whether it's good to go or it gets scrapped, scrub that sheet off of my bike. I don't give a f dash. I want that sheet off it. Bakugo growled as he looked at the graffiti and heard Izuku's voice in his head saying what Deku meant. I know you only want Tetsu working on your bike, but I have one myself. I did all my own mods. Suzuki GSX-R with Akrapovic. Bakugo scoffed as Kendo told him about her own bike. She bit her lip to keep from mentioning the GSX-R was considered by many to be the king of street bikes, not a fat boy low like Bakugo believed. But if she wanted to touch the Harley, she had to play nice. My point is, I know bikes. And while Tetsu works his magic on the guts, would you let me scrub the paint off of it? Bakugo eyed her for a long minute before nodding. Just paint removal. He looked at Tetsu and pointed at his own eyes, then Tetsu's. He repeated the motion a couple of times. They finished up their consultation, Tetsu informing Bakugo he would call him once he had a total for parts and to help him figure out what he needed to submit to the police and insurance company. Kirishima told Tetsu it was very nice meeting him after years of hearing how magic his hands were, and the blush that lit Tetsu's cheeks went unnoticed by Bakugo, who was looking suspiciously at Kirishima. It wasn't unnoticed by Kendo though, who had to stifle her laughter. Izuku took a business card while no one was paying attention, tucking it into his back pocket for later. Kirishima and Izuku headed to their next class, and Izuku was happy Bakugo was still sleeping when he got home. He made Kirishima swear up and down to secrecy as to what he was going to do. Real steel auto body. This is Tetsu. A deep, now familiar voice came through the phone. Hello Tetsu. I'm Midoriya. I came in with Bakugo earlier. Bakugo was in a mood as he got ready for work, knowing he'd have to take a zip. He hated relying on other people where in normal circumstances he could easily get to work on his own. He was ready to go and just waiting around for a text saying his ride was nearby when Izuku walked up to him. I'm sorry for everything. Not your DMN fault. Izuku looked down. It still feels like it. You've done nothing but be amazing to me, and this is how you're paid back. I'm sad as hell about my bike, but that's not on you. Izuku asked Bakugo a question that he should have expected by now because of the kind of person Izuku was, but it still caught him off guard. Did you want a hug or to just be left alone? It was a trap. Because the answer was to be left alone. The only time he liked being around people when he was mad was if he got to fight them. But it was a hug from Izuku. He didn't get as many hugs as he wanted, but he also didn't ask for them, even though he was sure Izuku would oblige every time. It was a slippery slope. Ask for one and then he'd never stop. But this one was offered. He opened his arms and Izuku moved closer until he was in them. They stood for a long minute in silence, holding each other tightly. Izuku was holding him around the waist with his head on Bakugo's shoulder. The smaller man let out a yelp and tried to jump forward, which only caused his body to be pressed fully against Bakugo as the blonde's phone vibrated against Izuku's back, it still being in his hand from earlier. Bakugo chuckled and pulled back, calling to Kirishima. See ya, shitty hair. His gaze lingered on Izuku. Talk to you later? Izuku broke out into a grin. Have a good night at work, Bakugo. Tsich. With that, Bakugo was out of the apartment. Oolala. Someone's got a cruish, Kirishima sang when he was sure Bakugo was by the elevator and out of earshot. Izuku's face went bright red. Kirishima. It's not like that. Are you trying to convince me or yourself? Kirishima just looked at him, eyebrows raised. You have it so bad for him. Izuku flopped onto the couch, face in his hands. Is it that obvious? It is, Kirishima admitted. I've noticed it for ages and oh my god, just make a move. I've kissed his cheek, Izuku admitted quietly. Why didn't you do it when he left? Kirishima yelled. I don't know if he wants that from me. He doesn't do stuff like that back. But I sometimes think he's telling me he likes me in his own way. Kirishima was quiet as he considered his wording. He had promised Bakugo he wouldn't flat out reveal his crush. I think your actions encourage him. But given all you're going through, maybe he would want you to set the pace. You really think so? He sounded so hopeful, but then he seemed to beat it back down. I really like him. I feel good with him. Like I'm better and stronger than I was. Less afraid of the world. He's given me so much and I want to give him just as much back. He can do so much better than me. Someone more his equal, without the stalking motorcycle destroying X or the baggage. Someone less broken. I get that, but I mean you're wrong. We've been best friends for over 10 years and living together almost as long. Trust me when I say you're good for him. Also, he wouldn't give you the time of day if he thought you weren't worth it, let alone go to the extent he does. Kirishima's words gave him courage, and when he thought the redhead wasn't looking, he'd text Bakugo. There were long gaps between texts, but he knew Bakugo was busy. Kirishima was a good friend and never commented on the stupid smile of Izuku's face every time his phone would go off. Despite having to zip home for a couple of days, Bakugo was in a surprisingly good mood when he got home. His co-workers said they didn't know what had come over him, but they liked it and told him to keep it up. He couldn't tell them it was just texts from a cute boy. That made him sound like some middle school girl with a stupid crush. The slight smile was still on his face when he got home, which didn't happen because no one was around to see it, turned into a frown as he heard the shower running. No one should be awake now. He headed to the hallway. Kirishima's door was shut, and his own was wide open. He poked his head in to check on Izuku just to be sure. He was gone so clearly he was the one showering. Bakugo was walking past the bathroom towards the living room when he heard a choked sob from Izuku. Concerned, he knocked lightly on the door. Midoriya? Why? I'm coming in. Bakugo let himself in and was hit with a wall of heat. He sat on the toilet seat lid, unable to see anything through the thick shower curtain. What happened? Why are you crying? And nothing. I just wanted a shower. Izuku sniffles and reached for the scrubber. But it wasn't a loofah or anything. It was a full-blown scouring pad, like the kind used on dishes. Bakugo caught his wrist just before it pulled back behind the shower curtain. Izuku jerked quietly with pain even though he was barely touched. Bakugo's eyes widened as he saw raw skin. He pulled Izuku's arm out more and the scraped skin kept going up, bright red from the scouring pad but also from hot water. With a sinking feeling, Bakugo put his fingers under the water near the taps and pulled back quickly. It was way too hot. He was surprised there weren't burns forming. He shut the water off and moved a towel around the curtain. Put this on. Izuku started to cry again, having tried to keep it in while Bakugo was in the bathroom. Opening the curtain, the blonde warned before he did. He wasn't nearly prepared for what he saw. He choked back a cry, his own eyes pricking with tears at the sight of pain and despair in front of him. Izuku was almost doubled over from crying so hard. The puffiness in his face said he'd been at it for a while. His exposed skin was bright red from the water being too hot. All up his arms, down his legs, his torso, what he could reach of his back, it was all raw. Bakugo didn't know how long he'd been in there scraping his skin off, but it was long enough for some parts of his body to have thin rivulets of blood trickling down. Everything hurt to see, and that was as an onlooker. Bakugo wasn't sure if he was strong enough to know what caused the agony in those green eyes, what had led him to do this to himself. Izuku started sliding down the shower wall, arms curled in front of him as he tried to make himself smaller and smaller. Bakugo grabbed his own towel from the hook on the door and wrapped it around Izuku's thin, raw shoulders. He carefully helped him out of the tub. He led him slowly to the bedroom and shut the door behind them. He left Izuku standing in the middle of the room before grabbing a pair of all-might pajama pants. They were so old and worn that there were holes, but they were also the softest thing he owned. He kept his back turned until Izuku had them on. He eased Izuku down to sit on the bed before grabbing polysporin, gauze and medical tape. Bakugo started prepping and wrapping up Izuku's body before daring to ask the question that has been on his mind the last 20 minutes. What the hell happened? I had a bad dream. That seemed to be the understatement of the century, but Bakugo didn't push. It took Izuku the better part of an hour to tell him about the dream, which was mostly memories of Kai. Nothing had caused it. It just happened on its own, as dreams sometimes do. He seemed to get stuck on a loop, repeating over and over that he couldn't get clean. Finally, he explained that the hot water and scouring pads were to try and cleanse himself from all the times Kai had violated him. As if shredding the layers of skin off would be enough to finally feel clean, like he was contaminated by Kai's touch. He was on a roll now as he picked at a loose towel thread, telling Bakugo things he never told anyone, the things he hid from his mom when he told her about other things Kai had done. His tears faded to nothingness, too numb as his brain tried to lock down the memories again and his body tried to start healing his mutilations. If you skip that section, Baku helps bandage up Izuku and Izuku confides in him. By that point, Bakugo had moved up to sit on the bed and held him carefully. When Izuku couldn't cry anymore, Bakugo took over, tears silently splashing on the bandages now protecting Izuku's skin. They were silent for a long time before Bakugo spoke. I'm not gonna say I know what it's like to go through all that, or feel so dirty that you shred your skin. I'm not trying to make it like I had it worse, 'cause I didn't. But you told me your demons, so I'm going to tell you mine. Because that fucker held everything over you and I want you to feel on equal ground with me. Izuku looked up at him. If he had the energy to smile, he would have. But he just put his head back against Bakugo's chest. So a couple of years ago, I was with this guy. I was lonely, he noticed me, so we hooked up. The SEC was insane so we moved fast. That wasn't the only thing that was insane. I don't even remember how it started. We just started arguing and then it was all fistfights. I don't know who hit who first. But my mom, she beat the shit out of me when I was a kid. I used to hit her back. Not proud of it and I don't just go hitting chicks for no reason. But because of her, if you attack me or mine, I hit back no questions asked. Anyway, no wasn't good for me. Hit me, stab me in the hand twice, and all the shit he'd say. I still hear it in my head. But I gave it back as much as I got it. I hit him back every time. Every word was yelled right back at him. I never stabbed him, but I did drag him behind my bike once so there's that. It was like 10 feet and I was going slow. But I still did it. Kiri told me so many times that he was afraid I was going to die because of that fucker. I should have listened to him. I'm the only family he has left and losing me scares him more than anything. But I laughed at him and called him weak. With all the awful shit I said and did, that's what I regret most. It wasn't until Mina from your class came along that we split. Kiri had just asked out Pinky and it was a rare moment no and I weren't giving or fighting. He said he wanted to bring his girl around, but it didn't feel safe to with how we fought. No got said. I mean I had been getting him riled up but It escalated so fast and next thing I knew he threw the lamp at Kiri. Izuku looked up at him and Bakugo smoothed his now dried curls. Kiri was fine, mostly he was just surprised. I lost it though. I don't remember hitting him, but I remember Kiri pulling me off. My knuckles were raw. I told him to get the F out. We cleaned his blood off the floor and threw his sheet off the balcony. I saw No on the street a week later and his face was still F'd up. I always said I would kill for Kiri and that time I almost did. I'm not like that anymore. I wasn't even like that before him. When I saw his face like that, I swore I would never rush into another relationship or be with someone out of loneliness. I lost myself and I was afraid I wouldn't be able to get me back. Monoma was my demon, but I was his too. And my own. Bakugo expected Izuku to do something, pull away or even tense up. But all he did was put his hand over Bakugo's. He hadn't been judged and he wasn't about to do it to him. Of all people, Izuku understood trying to break away from what a bad relationship turned a person into. The Bakugo he was getting to. No was not the same as the one in this story, just as Izuku was not the same man in the story Bakugo heard. Izuku had no energy to verbalize that though. So he rested his bandaged hand over Bakugo's and slowly fell asleep. When Izuku woke up, he was still in Bakugo's arms. He barely remembered what had happened the night before with how thick his head felt. When Bakugo murmured good morning, the blonde story came back to Izuku. He squeezed the hand under his gently. He looked up into a face that was the picture of exhaustion. Izuku told him the worst moments of his life and Bakugo had shared his own monstrous story in return. Yet Izuku trusted him enough to fall asleep in his arms. The only way Bakugo could think to honor that was to keep a silent vigil over him as he slept, ensuring he was safe and protected all night. Kirishima had a lot of questions about why Izuku looked like a mummy, why he was wearing Bakugo's pants, why both their eyes were so puffy. All it took was a head shake from Bakugo to silence all of his questions. It took about a week, but Tetsu worked his magic and had repaired King Explosion Murder as good as new. The only problem was that Bakugo had to get ready to leave to speak with a lawyer regarding the Mineta case. Tetsu offered to hang around later if Bakugo was held up. He knew how badly Bakugo was wanting his Harley. I can grab your bike now. Kirishima offered a little too eagerly as soon as Bakugo hung up the call from Tetsu saying it was ready. Bakugo's eyebrows shot up. Spill it. There's nothing to spill. The blonde just stared at him. You have your G, not your M. He said, referring to the motorcycle-specific license. And you know I don't let anyone drive the king. Spill it. Kirishima looked cornered and Izuku's head went back and forth as he watched the two. Kirishima tried to act casually as he spoke. I mean, you can't be there right away and that guy might remember me from when I was with you when you did the consultation. He wouldn't have to stay late, so less hassles. What guy? Tall, silver hair, broad-chested. Longest eyelashes I've ever seen. Smells manly like car oil. That's what Bakugo was afraid of. My mech dude don't. I know that look. You're not hitting on my mechanic, you be. Why not? Kirishima grinned. You're not going for him. That man and I have a sacred bond. He's the only one that I let work on the king. He's got superpowers. He makes that baby sing. I won't risk losing my mechanic. My savior. All because you want to stick your D in something. I didn't say my D was going in anywhere. Kirishima grinned. Don't tarnish my mechanic with your perversions, fuckface. Kirishima cracked up laughing, almost missing Izuku piping up curiously. I didn't know you were into guys. I've only heard about Mina. Yeah. Bakugo chimed in as though he hadn't clued into that part of it. Why the F, didn't I know that? I've only dated girls, but that date I went on. A couple weeks ago, I was asked if I wanted to hook up by a guy from school. I wasn't against the idea and he's cute, so I figured why not give it a shot? This is the time for experimenting after all. Man, SEC with him was like an electric shock, you know? But he wasn't really my type outside of that. Kirishima shrugged. I'm just figuring out what my type is for men. Is it mechanics? No, Baku, he sighed. Just more manly guys, you know? I'm manly. Why'd you never hit on me? Did you want me to? Kirishima looked at Bakugo like he had two heads. It was one thing to compliment each other's butts and hug. But getting naked with him? Not so much. They were too much like brothers. Your hair's too shitty for you to fall under my radar. I'm just curious. Because you're in butt. That's not manly. And I know too much about you to find you attractive. Like that time you dash. F you. He cut Kiri off before Izuku could hear an embarrassing story. Kirishima was grinning. So about Picky Dash. No. Bakugo was not the happiest guy when he got home from Tetsu's shop despite the fact that he had his baby back. Did you know he did that? Was the first thing he asked Kirishima when he opened the door. Who did what? Midoriya. The mention's head popped up to peer over the couch at Bakugo, who glared at him. You paid for part of my bike. And you, he pointed at Kiri, let him. It was all his idea. The redhead threw their friend under the metaphorical bus. I just went with him so I could see your hot mechanic. Why the F would you waste money on my mods? Bakugo pointedly ignored that last comment. This whole thing happened because of my ex. It's the only way I could think of to apologize for that. You spent hundreds on a seat and fuel gauge. So did you, Kiri pointed out. That's different. Why the F would you do that? Because without all the mods, it's not really the king anymore. Izuku wasn't backing down, and even though he hated that much money was wasted on him, Bakugo's heart flared. I wanted you to have him back in all his glory. Another, less angry, fire started raging in Bakugo, ignited by Izuku fighting back. The challenge was exciting for him and it was getting too hard to stay mad. He needed to channel it elsewhere. Even though he knew he shouldn't, he motioned to Izuku. Get dressed. We're going for a ride. Izuku grinned and went to change his clothes into something thicker. He grabbed his helmet and Kirishima's old leather jacket and headed out the door. Bakugo eyed the fitted jeans that showcased Izuku's but perfectly as they headed to the elevator. Where are we going? Nowhere. Just gonna ride. Bakugo really just wanted to show off and try out his new addition to the king. When they got to the bike, Izuku paused before slowly approaching. Bakugo, he whispered as he ran his hand over the passenger seat. I asked Tetsu to grab me a beach seat and footboards while he was doing repairs. When you called to order my seat, he got yours so they matched. He put everything on even though I was going to. I didn't get the sissy bar put on. That's the backrest for the passenger, he clarified. If you want it so you don't have to hold on to me as much, I can install it now. Your call. No, it's fine, Izuku said quickly. I like holding on to you. I just want to kiss him, Bakugo thought as he yanked the helmet down onto his head so he wouldn't be tempted. Izuku pulled his own on and climbed on after Bakugo sat down. He wrapped his arms around him, but it seemed weird that there was more room, and he was higher, than when he shared the actual seat with Bakugo. It made sense, but it felt weird. I'm good. Izuku's voice came through the speaker in Bakugo's helmet. Revving the king, Bakugo drove out of the garage. It was a couple hours before they had returned home feeling exhilarated. Kirishima was gone, having sent a text that he was going out for a bit. Even though it was his day off and he was back to sleeping for a couple hours when he got home again, Bakugo needed to head to bed. Thanks for the ride. Izuku smiled at him as he went back into the living room from grabbing a drink. I can give you a ride any time, left Bakugo's mouth before he could stop himself. He hid his internal screaming well, covering it with an arrogant smirk. Izuku blushed bright red and Bakugo winked before starting to head down the hallway to his room. Night, nerd. Two can play this game, Izuku thought deviously, encouraged by the blonde's obvious flirting and repeated words Bakugo had said to him multiple times over the course of his living there. Dream of me, he called sweetly. Shut the F up. While Bakugo slept, Izuku got to work on a project for one of his classes. He had just gotten settled when his phone vibrated on the coffee table. It was a text from an unknown number. Deku, my dear, I hope you had fun on your little outing. Izuku deleted it immediately. He had a great day with Bakugo and he was not going to let Kai ruin it. He got up and double-checked the locks on both doors, then made some tea. He put music on quietly that made him think of people other than Kai, people like the one sleeping in the other room. Hours later, Izuku's project was fairly far along and a stir-fry was cooking on the stove. He had no idea while he had been working and cooking that his webcam had been running in the background, capturing everything. The angle of the laptop to the kitchen also meant other things were captured. Like Bakugo entering the kitchen in only low-slung pajama pants and standing so close to Izuku his chest was against his back as he stole a piece of beef from the skillet. And it also captured the way Izuku gazed up at him as he did. By the time Kirishima came home, homework was done for the day, dinner was over, and Bakugo and Izuku were 2 movies in. Bakugo paused the movie and Izuku shifted a bit away from him so it didn't look too suspicious. Had been cuddling slightly, for example. Which they absolutely had not been. What happened? Izuku asked as he saw Kiri's clothing. He was a mess. There were black smears all over his shirt and knees of his pants. Bruises on his neck were visible even by the low light of the TV. What the F dash? Bakugo got up to make sure he was okay. Kirishima stepped back. And that's when Bakugo realized it. The mess on Kiri's clothes was oil, and the bruises were hickeys. What did you do? He asked the redhead warily. I was learning how to drive stick. Kiri tried to keep a straight face. Got my oil checked? Looked at a big exhaust pipe? Unable to hold it in anymore and spurred on by the look on Bakugo's face, Kirishima cracked up. I swear to if you F'd my mechanic, Bakugo warned. He asked me out for a drink. I couldn't really say no. You didn't have to F him. If you knew what he was working with, you'd be bent over in a heartbeat. Besides, just because you're pumping the gas at Self-Service Island, it doesn't mean I have to. Izuku couldn't help the snort that escaped, even though he wasn't in any better of a situation. After he collected himself, he winced a little as he asked, I don't think I want to know the answer to this, but how did you end up covered in black? There's nothing more manly than a grease monkey. Kirishima was full of comments about how Izuku will understand once Bakugo has done his own bike maintenance, as the blonde did when it was needed. But he couldn't risk Bakugo backtracking on his progress. They just needed to get together already. You're repulsive and I hate you dash, Bakugo growled and sat back down. After a second he sat up straighter and pointed at Kiri, not completely finished his tirade. I swear to If I lose my mechanic because of you, I'm kicking your butt. Kiri laughed and headed in for a shower as Bakugo slumped back into the couch with a huff. Breakfast was weird. Izuku was bright-eyed, beaming, and beautiful. Kirishima was all gleaming teeth and non-stop verbal diarrhea. And then there was Bakugo, sullen and grumpy. Izuku was finally going to see his mom and he was so excited. It had been a couple of years since he had seen her. Kirishima was going with Izuku and was genuinely curious about Mama Midoriya, as he called her. They had a vacation planned for their break from school. All Bakugo knew was that for a few days he would be alone. Normally he'd be excited for it, but all he could think about was that for the first time in months he would be without Izuku. He would join them after a couple days. He was dreading the time in between, but since Mineta was going to trial, he had to be there to testify. Kirishima kept talking and it got to the point Bakugo sent him away because he needed a minute. He was getting a headache and the idea of Izuku being gone was making him miserable. He just wanted a minute alone with him. Kiri, go make sure you have everything. Izuku watched as their friend left for his room. It's going to be weird without you, Izuku admitted, looking over where red eyes were already on him. A few days without seeing Izuku was going to be torture. An idea nudged the back of his mind and he tried ignoring it. Taking pictures really wasn't his thing, but the alternative was days without seeing that freckled face. Ding, he missed him already. Bakugo moved behind him and pulled out his phone. He leaned his head against Izuku's. He took a picture and gave a quick, tight hug before moving away to sit back down. Good call, Baku bro. Almost forgot my charger. Kirishima beamed as he re-entered the room. Oh no, anything but that, Bakugo said dryly. All too soon, in the middle of a speech Bakugo was giving to Kirishima on how to behave, a text came in. My mom's here. Izuku exclaimed, cutting Bakugo off slightly. Gathering their bags, they headed down to the front of the building, Bakugo trailing. A green-haired woman sat in her car, waiting patiently. As soon as the three boys came outside, she was out of the car. She was shorter and rounder than Izuku, but it was obvious who he got his looks from, right down to the matching tears in their eyes. They hugged tightly for a long minute before they separated so she could meet the other two. I'm Kirishima. The redhead was all smiles and didn't waste any time hugging her back when she moved in for one. After all, that was her son's friend, so that made him her son now too. I'm Inko Midoriya. You can call me whatever you're comfortable with. Her smile was as bright and as genuine as her son's. Mama Midoriya it is, Kirishima told her, and she laughed, completely okay with it. She turned her attention to the blonde that was piling the bags into the trunk. You're Bakugo, right? Huh? Yeah, that's me. He wiped his sweaty hand on his pants before extending it to her. She clasped his hand warmly. Izuku said you'd be joining us in a couple of days. I've heard so much about you. I'm glad you'll be able to come up for a little while at least. You have my address? I do. Midoriya made me repeat it so many times I almost have it memorized. Inko laughed. That sounds like my son. Guys, Izuku whined, making them all laugh. Even Bakugo had a half smile. The blonde moved to hug Kirishima, whispering for him to behave himself. Baku my bro. I always behave myself. He grinned as he let go and got into the back seat. Inko went around to the driver's seat, giving Bakugo and Izuku a moment. They might not have been a couple, but from all her son had to say about him over the last couple of months, she knew how special he was to Izuku. Bakugo pulled him tightly to his chest and Izuku's arms went around him. It'll be quiet without you, Bakugo admitted quietly. Thank you for booking time off to come up with us. I guess it can't be right away. Izuku gazed up at him with his best puppy eyes. I'll be there as soon as I can, Bakugo promised. I'll send you pictures until you get there. It'll be like you were there the whole time. And send me that one you took earlier. Bakugo let Izuku go and stepped back to let him get into the car. The slider man opened the car door but doubled back. He leaned in and placed a kiss on Bakugo's cheek. Kirishima immediately started whooping and wolf whistling. Izuku returned to the car bright red. Kirishima cracked up as Bakugo flipped him off. The finger turned into a proper wave as Inko and Izuku looked over. Bakugo didn't move from the apartment steps until the car was out of sight. True to his word, Bakugo's phone got blown up with pictures and videos by Izuku. Selfies with everyone making silly faces, even Mama Midoriya, scenery they passed that Izuku liked, videos of them singing along to classic rock songs. But there was a couple from Kirishima as well. Izuku clearly had no idea he was being photographed, and even though Bakugo responded with a middle finger emoji, he appreciated the pictures. He had a few errands, including picking up his suit for court. And when he got home, he immediately went to bed. He didn't sleep, rather he just laid there where it still smelled like Izuku and went through the pictures he sent from the trip to his childhood home. It was only when Kirishima sent him a picture of Izuku and Inko in front of the house. This way he knows what the house looks like. Did Bakugo realize he had gotten a video from Kiri as well? He played it and caught part of a conversation. Handsome. Mom. Even though he could only see Kiri's grinning face, he could hear the embarrassment in Izuku's voice. After 4 seconds he spoke again. He's just really helped me find myself again. The only thing he expects from me is to do what is right for me. He's been key in helping me heal as much as I have. He means a lot to me. He seems to know you're in love with him, if your earlier interaction is anything to go by. When are you going to make it official? Mom. Kirishima clamped his hand over his mouth to keep from laughing and winked at the camera before ending the video. Bakugo's face was red. Thankfully no one was there to see that. He opened Izuku's chat and sent the picture he had taken at breakfast. He didn't take a ton of pictures, but he wanted one of Izuku, so he didn't seem quite so far away. He didn't even care at this point. He hated the whole ordeal. He did like that picture though. They were looking at each other through the camera as Bakugo's head rested against his. They looked soft, and to echo Inko's words in the video from Kiri, in love. I love it. We look cute, laughing face came the quick reply. Bakugo smiled before rolling onto his side. He flipped through the pictures he had gotten. He could look at Izuku all day. Scrolling and re-scrolling through pictures that had come in, Bakugo studied the freckled face. Normally he stared at those green eyes, but he kept getting drawn to plush lips and long, thin fingers. God, how he wanted to feel both of those on his body. The more he looked, the more his body reacted until his boxers got uncomfortably tight. He shouldn't. The shower was one thing, but Izuku slept in this very same bed. That didn't seem to help though. If anything, it only made it worse because laying as he was, all he could smell was Izuku. The only thing he could picture was Izuku's face, sweaty with his eyes closed and mouth open as he ummed out Bakugo's name. Deciding he'd just wash the sheets later, he kept his favorite picture of Izuku open. He pulled himself out and slowly started stroking. Suddenly Izuku's smiling face was letting him know there was a video call coming through. Sheet f damn it f dash. He yelled as he quickly tucked himself back in before trying to answer the call as casually as he could. What? It turned out Midoriya just wanted to chat, and even though he had wanted to get his rocks off, Bakugo didn't mind postponing it a bit to talk to him. Though as soon as Izuku hung up, Bakugo whipped it out again. It was 3 days before Bakugo could join everyone at Izuku's childhood home. Because he would be getting there last, he would have 0 dibs on sleeping locations. Which basically meant he got the couch. Kirishima had laid claim to the guest room. Izuku was sleeping in his old bedroom, which was still plastered in All Might merchandise. It gave Kirishima a good laugh when he saw it and said it looked a lot like Bakugo's when they were little. Izuku was so happy that his motorcycle helmet fit in perfectly as it sat on his desk. He had brought it in case Bakugo wanted to go sightseeing in the small town. After he admired it on his desk for a couple minutes, and possibly taking a picture of it amidst the other All Might stuff to send Bakugo, he brought it down to show his mother. Inko Midoriya was not the happiest. It became even clearer when, in an attempt to soothe her worry, the boys ended up spilling the reckless stunts Bakugo did growing up, and with Izuku on the back. She picked up on little points like how Izuku getting the helmet didn't match how long he had been riding, which then led to admitting the lack of equipment on Bakugo's part. Kiri had his bros back though, telling Mama Midoriya how Bakugo always went without to make sure her son was protected and how he bought Izuku the helmet. He emphasized that it was a top-quality helmet. Top quality also meant top-quality pricing, which he claimed to not know until Izuku went to the bathroom. Then he told Inko just how much Bakugo had invested into her son's safety of his own free will. She wasn't as hard on Bakugo after that. Inko and Kirishima got along well from the beginning, but it improved even more when he found out she met the man that had played Crimson Riot in the movies, a superhero from her younger days who happened to be his all-time favorite hero. He had been in her hometown filming a scene for a movie in the Crimson Riot trilogy, and Inko had been an extra in one of them. Kirishima wanted to watch it, and even though they all had seen the movie 100 times over throughout their lives, they all watched it again. As soon as Inko appeared as a background waitress, Kirishima had started pointing, knowing immediately who she was by the green hair, though she was about the age they were now, so she looked a little different. Inko was loving having the boys around, and not just because Kirishima was calling her a movie star after the Crimson Riot role. She had been living alone since Izuku moved out, and she loved having people there. She even offered to let Kirishima take over the spare bedroom permanently. The redhead loved it. Everything he missed about his mom got projected onto her, and she ate it up. There was a lot of hugs, gentle teasing, and when Izuku would go to his room to talk to Bakugo, Kiri and Inko would sit outside with tea and talk. Or gossip, depending on the viewpoint. Inko asked a lot about her son, wanting to fill in blanks about Izuku's life since he moved in with them. He told her most things, including how Bakugo always seemed to right the various situations. He knew how Bakugo felt about Izuku, and if he could talk his bro up to score points with Inko, he would. He never lied though. He simply told her things Izuku didn't know or didn't realize. She could tell Izuku had fallen for his friend, and Kiri was going to make sure she knew it was very mutual. It was about mid-afternoon on the third day when Izuku's phone rang. He accepted the video call but didn't bother getting up from the couch as he usually did. He was really comfortable. "Hey Bakugo." Izuku smiled. "Baku my bro." Kiri called from across the room. "Hey nerd. You fuckface." He called to Kirishima despite not being able to see him. He was sitting on his bike in a suit. His helmet and jacket weren't on yet. "I'm on my way home. Trial's done. BSTRD's getting locked up for 6 years. "That's fantastic. Good job, hero." Izuku's flirting was as clear as day. It was made it funnier when Bakugo replied with an embarrassed, "Fluff. Where did your tie go?" Izuku asked as soon as he realized the blonde wasn't wearing one. "I threw it away." "What? Why would you do that?" "I tied it for you before I left. All you had to do was tighten it." "It's at home. I didn't want to wear it." "You're so difficult," Izuku chuckled, unable to hide the affection in his voice. "Whatever, you dimmin' nerd," Bakugo waved him off. "I'm grabbing my sheet then heading out. I should be there around 6:30 tonight." Izuku smiled. "I'll see you then. Bye Bakugo." "Bye bro." "Effed off Kiri." "Bye nerd." "Drive safe." Izuku added quickly before he could hang up. "Yeah sure." The line went dead, and as soon as Izuku lowered the phone, Kirishima's shark-toothed smile dominated the room. Midoriya and Bakugo sittin' in a tree casey. He sang giddily as Izuku's face went bright red. Even Mama Midoriya couldn't hold back her laughter. "Mom, you're supposed to be on my side." "She's siding with her other son now. You weren't there, but she adopted me. You were too busy having private conversations with Bakugo." The conversations were nothing like Kirishima was implying, but no amount of protesting by Izuku made that believable. A couple of hours later, they were halfway through making dinner when Izuku's phone rang. He dried his hands and grabbed it from the counter. He answered it immediately with a smile on his face. "Hey, really? That's great. I'll see you in a couple minutes then." "Okay, bye." Izuku turned to his mom and Kirishima. "Bakugo's about 5 minutes away. I'm going to wait outside for him." He got up and grabbed a hoodie from the coat rack before heading out to sit on the front steps. "He's really in love with him," Inko smiled softly. "Baku is just as bad," Kirishima informed her. "He has been for months. It's weird cause Baku is loud, abrasive, assertive, all that. He's done a complete he's still in but he's trying to not be those things around Midoriya so he doesn't scare him. Midoriya has called the shots pretty much since he came to live with us. He just doesn't realize it. They seem to be exactly what the other needs right now." I age your dash. Kirishima was cut off by knocking. Inko got up and opened the door. Bakugo stood on the front steps, backpack over his shoulder and helmet tucked under his arm. I made it. He saw Kirishima poke his head around the corner. After a beat he asked, "Where's Midoriya?"